Ladies, gentlemen, and non-binary pals, please give a warm welcome to our guests and friends on today's wonderful episode of Creative Recharge. Today's guests are Mia, the Vixen of Fiction, Dal Cecil Runo.
Hi.
Tom. And of course, your host, Lori! Yay! And now I shall stop the music. Oh, well, here we are. And I am deep into my being influenced by Kermit the Frog, is all I can say. How is everybody doing today? Pretty good? Not great? Yes. Hopefully. Woo! Yes. Yes. The ghost of Chandra may show up. I can't promise anything, though.
We shall see.
We shall see what we shall see. Woo! Got all excited there. Like, I'm going to forget something like I have done in the past in the last month where I forgot to hit live.
I may have done that before many times in the past.
Yes. Oh, yeah. The ADHD is like hardcore for me today. Like, I am deep into ADHD land. So if I forget anything, please feel free to just get on that bus and go, did you remember this? And the answer will be like, probably not. But thank you. Well, how is everybody doing today? Pretty good? Yep. The weather here is 71 degrees, so it is just so lovely outside. It's so nice. And if
the AC is still on.
Oh, yeah. AC, however, wasn't really on all weekend because Friday it was a high of 61 degrees Fahrenheit. So it was wonderful outside. It was so nice. We were like, gosh, I wish we didn't have other important things to do, like my doctor's appointment. Otherwise, we would have gone out and done some photography.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Like, it was beautiful. The clouds were gorgeous. It was just amazing.
It's that time of year. Do you guys get, you're further down south from me, so your weather is a little bit warmer. Y'all get the beautiful tree colors?
Oh, we do, actually.
Oh, yeah.
We do actually get it, but we don't get it till between Thanksgiving and Christmas, which is a really wonderful time to be looking at the leaves changing. Oh, Margaret says it is 44 here in Portland, and I'm about to set out on a walk. Congratulations. Nice. Good for you for taking care of your body. Is that Portland, Oregon, or Maine, or a Portland I am unfamiliar with? Which coast, essentially, is, I guess, what I'm really asking. Hello, Margaret. Hello, Lee Holderfeld writes, thank you for coming by. Enjoy your lurk. Yeah, Margaret is on the West Coast. Very nice. Very nice. I think, like, hasn't the leaves already been changing up there already? I think November's like past leaf peeping season for them.
Yeah.
Are the leaves changing for you, Nia?
They are starting to change. We still have a lot of green. We actually start losing leaves, but like just very few. Mm-hmm. Sometime around September, and we all get excited. It's like 10 leaves, but we're like, it's time to rake. I love fall that much. I'm like, it's raking time. I was like, what are you raking? I'm like, you can see them. So it's a little bit more accumulation by the 1st of November. So I was out today and I was like, can I rake again yet? Not really, but it's okay. It looks pretty. I actually like the leaves in the yard. But now I've got Loki, so he keeps finding them and bringing them in the house, which is not great. So we try to keep them cleaned up a little bit.
Yay, Chandra made it.
Hey, y'all. So our
Chandra,
weather
we
is
were just talking about
fantastic.
how the leaves look in your neck of the woods. Do you have any yellow yet?
They're green and they're dead on the ground. There is no in between.
There's no in between, huh? Okay.
You me
So
same,
confused.
Chandra. You me same.
I'm like, I honestly
Yeah, I
hate
think
fall
like
so much.
Chandra and Nia are approximately same parallel. You know,
Yeah, I'm in the Carolinas, so.
Oh yeah, we are.
versus we're like less than an hour away from the Gulf Coast.
Yeah.
And our leaves don't start changing until between like like right before Thanksgiving, and they go on till close to Christmas, depending on the weather. So if it's rainy, the leaves will not fall yet.
Mm-hmm.
They don't like, but if it's dry, they'll fall pretty quickly, like first week of December, which is when everybody has.
Some of them are already falling. I have to go, blow them off of the car.
Yeah, like we've got some weird tree in the front yard that a lot of people have problems identifying. So I love to get people who are, oh no, I'm very big into tree identification. Like, oh, you should totally come over. And every person, 8 people so far, are like, huh.
Don't know what that is.
Is that real? And I'm like, do you think we just have a fake tree? Is that what you think's happening here?
We lived in this one place, and it was this 100-year-old farmhouse. And at some point in time, I think it was maybe the previous tenant had planted what we thought was this beautiful like Christmas pine. And then in the fall, all of its leaves fell off, and I was like, it died. And then in the spring, all the leaves came back out, and I was like, this is not supposed to be a thing.
But it looked like an evergreen.
It did. It had needles and everything. And it did that every year that we lived there. In the fall, all the needles would fall off. In the spring, it would come back just as evergreen as ever.
Oh, wow. That reminds me of my pomegranate. Because in the fall, like everything falls off and it looks like a dead twig. And I'm like, oh my gosh. First year I had the pomegranate, I thought it's dead. But I always give my plants a chance. And it came back perfect. I'm like, oh, okay, this is just what the pomegranate plants do. They look like they're completely dead, but it's not. And it still grew fruit and everything. They're really cute. The squirrels steal them before we get them.
Glory, I need to interrupt you for a moment, and I know this is not at all on topic, but
we're still in the fun chatty bit, so you're fine anyway.
Okay, cool. So for your fun game night that you do, there's a new game called Don't Starve.
Uh-huh.
Have you played it yet?
I have not. I have only heard legend.
Okay.
Of this.
I need you to play it because I need to watch you play it.
Oh God. Y'all know how terrible I am at solving puzzles. Like, there's Nia desperately typing to coach me to solve the dumbest puzzles for children.
This is exactly why I want to watch you play.
I'm like, come on, Gloria, you got this.
Is it unkind? Probably.
And then there's Morgan Freeman's voice. She did not, in fact, have this. Like, that would be.
I want you to know that I started playing at 6:00 yesterday, and I played till 10:30.
Oh my goodness!
And that was 3 or 4 different characters because I starved.
I was about to say, did you keep starving to death? No.
There was one time, though, where a monster came out of nowhere and ate me, so that was fun.
Wow.
Is that a thing?
Monster
I thought it was like reality-based. I did not know that it
I didn't
into magical realism.
Imagine my surprise. I was like, what? You said don't starve. You didn't say anything about don't get eaten.
Yeah, I thought this was a starvation-based game.
Oh my goodness. Yes, I want to see this game too.
Yeah.
Played by Glory.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, 2 votes.
We're friends on Steam, right?
I don't know if we are. Give me just a second. I will power up the Steam mobile here.
Wait, you can friend people on Steam?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you can also have a wish
Oh, that's
list
how
on
you
there.
play games together.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very new to Steam. I just got it last month. No, I got it in September, but I didn't do anything with it in October.
Apparently, Charlie's hubby and Spence have both really been enjoying playing the game as well, according to Cap.
Let me just hold on one second.
Glory, this is what I was telling you about the mouse.
Oh no! Hold on, let me make you bigger. Let me see it. Aw, the baby is just too.
If you were on my screen
those
earlier,
do look like they're kind of wedged in, so they probably won't.
Yeah, they're not
fall
coming out
anytime soon. So.
Yeah, if you were on my stream earlier, I did drop my mouse on Loki, and he chewed one of the parts that popped off.
Oh no!
Yeah, the mouse still works, but that piece is never going back on there.
Okay, I am putting my Steam code in the private chat, so you can plug that in. At least I think that's the right code. Oh, I'm so bad at this. Never.
I found you.
Oh, thank goodness. I'm like,
We are friends.
Oh, good. Is it Don't Starve Together or Don't Starve?
Don't Starve. I'm trying to find it, and now it's like.
Oh, they have Don't. What is the starter pack?
Trying to find which one I got, and now all of a sudden there's like 11 million of them.
Yeah, that's what I'm like. Which one? Well, there are mysteries, and we will figure them out. But in the meantime, would anyone like to do an introduction?
Oh, sure.
They are totally optional.
I can do that.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, me first. Okay. Hi, I'm Mia, the Vixen of Fiction here on YouTube. I'm also on Twitch. I do lots of writerly things. I like to write with my friends on live streams on both of those channels. You can catch me on occasion. My schedule is a little bit crazy, but I do semi have a schedule. You can catch me every other Monday, Friday, and Saturday. Since Wednesdays, which was my perfect day, my kids have usurped it from me. So Wednesday's no longer a great day for me to stream.
Oh, that is explained.
So I have a floating schedule because 4 kids, 3 dogs, hubby, job, just a few things. But I will keep you posted on the gram, which you can follow me there on Instagram at the Vixen of Fiction. And I'm a writer of fantasy, sci-fi, historical fiction. I do a little bit of paranormal and romance mixed in with those. And that's me.
Yay, thank you. Chandra, did you want to go next?
Yeah. Oh, hi. Yes. It is I, Chandra of the Arthur. I write stuff. I live stream on Tuesday nights from 8 to 10. I'm either on YouTube or Twitch. If you can't find me on one, just switch. I have new videos that go live every Wednesday and Friday. I also write historical fiction, science fiction, and fantasy. I have some new stuff in my Ko-fi store, so you should go see that. And I am working on a YouTube Twitch events calendar for like big bashes and all the shindigs and writing challenges and stuff. So if you are interested in something like that, just come on over. And if you're hosting an event, just slide into my DMs on the gram so I can add you to my calendar.
Nice. Dal, would you like to do an introduction? Dal?
I was muted.
Yep.
I was
She's
like,
really giving this fabulous introduction, and we missed it.
yeah. Oh, okay. Okay.
Take two, Dal.
Hello there, humans. I am Dal Cecil Runo. I am a blind storyteller for introspective readers, mostly writing sci-fi, but I do other genres with my short stories and a little bit of poetry. I released a short story yesterday. It's on my Coffee and Patreon and all the good stuff.
Yay.
But yeah, my YouTube channel is gonna come back in full force in 2022. I don't stream. I do pre-recorded stuff because streams mostly drain my energy, but Glory is my friend, so I'm here. And I like historical fiction, and I would like to learn more about the genre, so that's why I'm here. I'm here more as a learner than as a teacher this time.
Very nice. Thank you, Dal. Tom, would you happen to want to do an introduction?
I don't know what to say about me. I'm Tom's Hot Takes. I mostly, hang out with Glory on her streams and occasionally do some story development. And, it's the beginning of Nano.
You also have your Vela project link down below as well.
Oh, yes. And of course, there is a different universe story going on in Vela.
The first 3 episodes are free.com. Totally free, at least for American readers. Unfortunately, it's not opening up for everyone else yet.
Glory.
All right, since I put him in the hot seat, and y'all, it's my turn. Hi, I'm Glory, and if you don't realize that you've wandered onto our channel, Glory Writes the Blues, links are down below. I stream on this channel Mondays at 4 p.m. Eastern. I stream on Twitch on Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Central, so that's 9 p.m. Eastern with Tom. Yeah, there. And what we have been doing last month, and we will continue to do this month for the 9 p.m. Wednesday stream on Twitch, is we really go over our process for how we come up with the show. Like Monday's show, we do it ahead of time. If anybody's interested in how we essentially develop a show, and every week we do this, and how we come up with our titles and everything, we literally do it in, during sprints and in between sprints. So it's a lot of fun. But we wanted to be able to share how we do that. So that's what we've been doing for the last month, and this month we will continue to do that. Thursdays at 3:30 Eastern, I do the Coffee Bunny Cafe with Kat Leah Writing on Twitch, and we rotate whose turn it is to host. So if it's not on one, it's on the other. And in theory, the auto hosting is working. No promise. But it is a lot of fun. It's mostly chaos. That's all I can promise you. There will be chaos. Sometimes there's coffee, bagels, crochet, writing. And in fact, Pat was talking about maybe we will do sprints during Coffee Bunny for November to help our Nano friends out. So that is very exciting. And beyond that, I like to show up on these folks with them, doing all the things. Whenever they invite me, I am summoned. I love to come. So if you are interested in having me show up somewhere, please message me and let me know. I would love to join you. And yeah, that is me. So
I forgot to mention a thing.
Yes.
I also have started doing a prompt Saturdays with Natalie Locke, and we do one of the prompts from her book that she's been working with, and then we make up a prompt as well. And we've been like swapping and critiquing and having just a jolly good time with it. So if you like flash fiction or writing prompts or stuff like that, you should check it out.
Ooh, very cool. It sounds like a lot of fun.
Also, Glory, check your Steam.
Ah, yes. Somebody gave me a gift of a game, so now I have literally no excuse.
Yep, now you got to do it.
Now you got it.
So let me just put this out there as a thing then. If you would like Glory to play a game,
should just get it for her.
That is true. Like, yeah, that's the secret. Yes, so that is what we will be playing sometime very soon on the Twitch channel, on the Twitch. We will try our best not to starve at all. I think this is the Hamlet version, right?
Yes.
Which, of course, you know how much I love Hamlet. Like, I could have a master's degree in Hamlet. That's how much I have studied Hamlet.
Even better. Yes.
Yeah, I'm really into Hamlet, like, in a very, very interesting way. Okay, so must not distract myself. Focus, Glory. Okay. It was already going to be a series CD.
Focus.
Okay. So the summary of the episode. So here we are. Today we're going to be talking about historical fiction as genre writers. So tips, advice, we're going to go over all of it. We definitely want to answer any and all of your questions. So if you have any, be sure to put them in the chat. Let us know. What do we have to say about historical as a summary? Oh, sweet babies. I have a weakness for the furry friends.
Historical is amazing, and I don't know why it's not the #1 genre there.
I mean, good point, actually. Almost every kind of reader I've ever met when I worked at the public library at least enjoyed some part of the historical genre umbrella of something, some subgenre under the historical genre. So it seems to be a big one to me, but I feel like there is some gatekeeping going on, and that is why there's not more enjoyable. Versus a lot of gatekeeping has been dismantled for romance, and I think that that's partly why it's so much more popular, because writers are able to give readers what they want. So that is sort of our summary of today's episode. We're going to really delve into the nitty-gritty of historical fiction, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so if you have any comments, you have any questions, be sure to let us know. If you are watching this on the replay, still let us know in the comments, and we will all do our best to reply. If it's something that, if you have a question and I feel like, our panel didn't answer that, I will literally screen grab it and send it like, hey, you want to show up in the comments and say your bit? So please let us know, since I noticed that about every episode of this show for the following 4 weeks, it gets rewatched about as equal to the live watch numbers. So pretty much 50% of our viewers are rewatch viewers, at least. So that's what it's like. Just put them in the comments. We will still answer them if we didn't get a chance to answer them during the live show. And also, I'm just going to say it because we're at the beginning, and Tom has made it very clear that I am socially obligated to. If you are enjoying yourself, if you feel like you're getting something out of it, we would absolutely love for you to subscribe. And if you are interested in subscribing, let me go ahead and suggest, just go ahead and ring that bell, baby. Just ring it for us. Ring that bell so that every time we're doing a show, just ring the bell for me. And if you're enjoying today's show, please click like. Please let us know. That is so that the algorithm knows, hey, you enjoyed it. So people who watch similar ways that you do will then also see that in their timeline. So just things to think about. Friend. Yes, ma'am.
You're so close.
I know. Okay, all weekend Tom and I have been talking of why is YouTube messing with us? Because they every time we check it every hour, it's dramatically different. YouTube is just messing with our heads, and we're trying to no, we're not going to be in that kind of relationship with you, YouTube. But YouTube's but we are less than 400 watch hours also from hitting that 4,000. So if you would to be supportive, hey, here's the thought. You could just play it.
Rewatch.
Yeah, rewatch some of the old episodes. We have playlists set up, by the way. And if you would like us to keep you company, maybe in the morning while you get dressed, maybe in the evening while you wind down, just hit that playlist and let it play for you. I'm just throwing that out there. We're
It's quite good. I was going through your playlist at the end of last week when I was like, I need something to listen to keep me busy. So
we do.
I highly recommend.
We getting it done.
Yeah, so we are really, really close.
I'm putting most of the streams in the background. I mean, I listen. Okay, I'm very honest. I don't really listen, but I write with music. I write with music. I'm sorry. I know I am like the bleh of the group, but I play them in the background. I just let them run and do their thing. So
when I write with silence. Like, it is silence except for nature. Like, there's usually cats walking around in the leaves outside, and occasional like the breeze and things, but that's like all the sound. I like silence when I write, so I absolutely understand. Of like, I don't want people talking. However, that said, I like in the morning when I'm getting dressed, getting ready to
That's when I'm listening.
Go to work or get ready to be with people. I do like to have conversations going on in the background, because then it kind of feels like I'm at a coffee shop and just sort of a jovial atmosphere. So
yep,
that's when
that's exactly what works for me. And the good thing is with your show, because sometimes I'll do it with people's sprints, so I'll know, okay, 20 minutes gone by, 30 minutes gone by. With you guys, I know it's been almost an hour. It's been about 55 minutes because we're getting ready to do a bio break, and I'm like, yes, I got an hour's worth of stuff done. No kidding.
Yes,
I mean, I was listening to you guys at the same time. So yes,
you're absolutely right. That is how we do it. So without further ado, if you are enjoying it, please be sure to share the show with your friends. Let them know. So many of you have, in fact, been so supportive of us that we have grown exponentially over the last 6 months. It is mind-blowing. Thank you so much. You don't know how much this means to us. It's part of our 5-year life plan to be monetized so that, we can get those pennies in and do all the good things. And we do hope you're getting something out of this show. And if you have feedback, please let us know here in the chat, in the comments, or you can private message us or email us. We are always interested in people's feedback. December and January, we are planning to do we're going to bring the Awkward Siblings back, and Tom had pitched a whole season of all the life skills we've learned in our decades of life. All the life skills, y'all. Every hack, every secret we've ever figured out. That is what we're going to talk about December and January. And we absolutely hope everybody will come and join us and share their life hacks that they've learned and all their little tidbits. And so that we can all do better. But also, we've noticed a lot of writers like to watch the Awkward Siblings. So we figured they're like getting ideas for characters. So
I have a lot to say about characters. Invite me when you're talking characters.
So definitely. Let me see if I can. There we go. All right. So without further ado, the first hour, what we like about this genre, historical genre, and any hot takes. Who wants to get started?
Oh, I'll do a hot take. I don't think it's a hot take, but it's just something I would like to remind people of. Historical fiction is more than just colonial and European.
Agreed.
And early American. There's other places that have fantastic historical fiction. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, like history has been happening for literally like thousands, if not tens of thousands of years technically. What happened in the Pleistocene era, in fact?
Yes.
With Homo sapiens, like there's a lot of drama to talk about all over the planet.
I know that's a movie, but still counts as historical fiction.
Oh yeah, and believe me, those kind of books are wildly popular at public libraries still. Decades after they did their initial first printing, they are even though these books are like this thick, and I'm like, why are they this thick when there's hardly any dialogue? Y'all, they're this thick, and people still eat them up. So there, I think it's definitely readers who are thirsty for that kind of thing, but there's not a lot of books coming out. So that's a wonderful tip is, hey, have you thought about that? That might be something to think, at least for a story. Maybe not. Yeah. Maybe you're not up for a full novel, but what's wrong? Write a short story and toe tip in there. Get the little toes warm. See what you think. See what your readers think.
I would also say, just as a reminder, alternate history is still historical fiction.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And that is also very, very popular.
I love it.
The part I really like about historical fiction that they don't bring up much, but it's just sort of a given, is that it is another culture. You go back, you know, let's be honest. The '80s was a different culture to now. The 1880s as well is a very different culture, and so it's a way to explore what things were like in a different situation than you are now. But there's always things that are related to the present.
I have a hot take for this too. Just because it happened in history doesn't mean you have to keep it in your historical fiction. Like, you don't have to write slavery if you don't want to in your historical fiction.
Yes, 100%.
I'm like, where is my amen fan? Oh, there you are, baby.
Yes.
Yes, amen.
Yeah, you don't have
to. Many people are like, I don't want to write it because I don't want to write. And I'm like, then don't write that. Please, well, then it's not accurate. So,
one of my favorite World War II novels had almost nothing to do with the horrible things that happened. Mm-hmm. And it's still about World War II. It's still very sad, and it's not like cleaning away what happened, but you're not reading about those horrible things. You're reading about a French blind girl trying to survive occupied France. It's different. Mm-hmm. So if you don't want to go there, don't. Like, you can do something totally different. I mean, all the other horrible things have been already written to death. You can do your own thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I mean, for me, a great example of that, and I've read every book that's out. I'm working on the Lord John Grey series right now, but Diana Gabaldon does a fantastic job. It's very well researched. And I love that she goes in and says, yes, all of you who are finna mansplain this to me, here's what I historically changed, and here's why. And this is also historical fiction. Right. I get to do that. Thank you and good night.
I'm sorry, go on.
She navigates the issues of slavery and healthcare and all kinds of things through as part of the story. She also has LGBT. I don't know if she has any queer characters, but she has diversity within her characters without erasing them, without necessarily changing all of the environment or the way that the characters would respond. She addresses it without making the story about that. Mm-hmm. They are still plot points, and it's not we're going to go in and do all of this stuff to change everything. So
this is my favorite, when there is representation, like the French blind girl, but it's not about a day in the life of the blind girl. Mm-hmm. It's not about the blindness, it's about everything else. Mm-hmm. It's just that she so happened to be blind, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. I'm believing in that book. I cannot shut up about it. Yeah. I need more books like that. Mm-hmm. It's my favorite. I don't want that representation becomes this kind of thing that it's only about, like, oh, my life as a diverse person because I am so different from you that you have to read all my differences. I hate that. I'm tired of it. Please no.
I mean, and like another one, people wouldn't even think about it, but YouTube, there's a channel, I can't remember quite what it's called, but it's something like, I don't think it's Cooking with Andong, but it's something like that. He has a very distinctive name of and like AANDONG or something. And he grew up in the very late 70s, I think was when he was born, but mostly grew up in the 80s in Soviet in a Soviet republic.
Oh, My Name is Andong.
Yeah, that's it.
That's the channel.
And he talks about a lot of little stories of just his childhood growing up, and also the stories from his mother and grandmother about, Soviet times. And they're all interesting. Mm-hmm. But it's not about, the awfulness of the Soviet Republic. It's, what is life like there? What is it you do day to day? These are all really interesting because it's a different culture. anytime you go back in time, there's a different culture. And you get to see, how did people, do things? What did they do for fun? Here's a secret. Humans will always find a way to have fun no matter what.
Amen.
If there is no fun in your story, those are not real humans.
Amen. Because people just can't bear that kind of drama, like protracted, without an emotional break. Like, humans be human,
Even with TV shows, that is where a lot of shows lose their viewers, is when they make it so overwhelmingly heavy for too long.
Mm-hmm.
We have enough real life.
But like, case in point, Nurse's humor. Nurses really get some dark humor.
Oh, that gallows humor kind of thing.
Yeah, because it's not always easy. But on the other hand, you will find just the humor in it, the ridiculousness of life.
You want to see most nurses laugh? Make a catheter joke. I'm like even nurses who've never actually done a catheter will laugh at a catheter joke, because it's that sort of dark humor. Usually like something ballooning, but nothing actually exploded catheter wise. They chuckle every time. I've never had a nurse not laugh at one of my catheter jokes. So nurses have that sort of dark humor for sure. A lot of soldiers do as well. Anybody who has to look at death and destruction, so a lot of firefighters, but even teachers who are often, I could say as somebody who used to be a public school teacher, you're dealing with these like little people, these adorable little human beings, and sometimes they get the real raw deal, and you have to just keep moving forward, if only so that these children understand to keep moving forward. And so teachers end up having a pretty dark sense of humor as well because of that. So anybody who's dealing with difficult situations. Excellent, Laura. Good stuff. And hello, VA. I'm so glad you could join us. I think for me, one of the things that I know I really got out of historical fiction when I started getting into it in middle school and high school age, and I mean, I still enjoy it, but like what I really liked about it was the historical fact usually baked into the historical fiction. And that, like, the historical fiction was so interesting. I then was curious to go look up what really happened, and then finding out, a lot of this is actually based on historical fact of these battles are real, these situations, the Crusades, whatever. So I ended up inadvertently learning a lot of historical fact by reading historical fiction. And I thought, this is a way more fun way to learn.
I mean,
a lot of historical
some great cases in point. The Blackadder British TV series. The most ridiculous aspects of every episode of Blackadder is historical facts. They didn't make up any of those. They just added in some extra dialogue. But if you watch Blackadder and you're like, that is so ridiculous, they made it up. No, that's the part based in fact.
Yes.
Yeah.
They couldn't make that up. And the same reason we love watching Horrible History, especially the first 5 seasons, is the more ridiculous it is, the more, no, humans did this. Humans thought this was a good idea, and they kept doing it long enough that we have records.
Yes. I love Horrible Histories, the live action version versus the cartoon. No, not really. But the live action version of Horrible Histories, especially the first 5 seasons, are so enjoyable to watch. And I have learned so much, even though it's a kids show, it's meant for literal children. And I still, like, when I'm really sick, it's like, let me just put on Horrible Histories and like lay in bed and watch that. Also, the music's fun. And you never know when Colin the dachshund will show up. So
I may have to look that up.
Yes, I highly recommend
I think it's on Hulu, I think is the one who currently has it.
Yes.
In the US.
It's also actually a lot of it is on YouTube, because Horrible Histories has their own channel on YouTube. And they have been releasing a lot of compilations over the last like 2-3 years, essentially during the Panini. They've been releasing a lot of program of, scenes and skits and stuff. So I highly recommend just watching for free on YouTube.
Yeah.
Quite honestly, especially the music stuff. Oh yes, honey. I have so many recommendations for just like certain songs they've done, including literally. There's a song of Vikings, and they keep they're singing literally. We're gonna paint the whole town red, literally, because I think somebody just got really upset that so many humans don't seem to understand how the word literally should be used.
Yeah.
But
Well,
it's a fun
literally
song.
is now just a normal word now. We just use it all the time.
Yeah, instead of literally.
Yeah. A fun one that I like to watch, and I cannot vouch for how accurate they are sometimes, but Drunk History, if you've ever seen it, is so
Yes.
Oh yeah.
It's
Oh no,
just
Drunk
funny.
History is all
Drunk
research.
History is
Very,
pretty
yeah,
accurate.
it's very. I'm like surprisingly accurate for how drunk they get.
Yes.
I'm like, yes, that's right. You're doing well. Keep going.
Yes,
You
they're
got
doing amazingly well.
I think that historical fiction and things like Drunk History go a long way to educating the populace, because a lot of people really don't know that much about history. So I found that historical fiction is a great way to get people interested in history, because they realize, oh, history doesn't have to be all super dry. There are some really fun aspects of it. And there are just some really interesting things that people would do, interesting ways that people handled situations. And they're still people, so they still face all the same things that we face now as far as social issues. And this is my annual plug for, if you have questions about women's clothing, you should probably talk to Glory.
No one's ever taken you up on it, so you're like one of the very few people I've ever had a chance who was like, well, who didn't go, well, I've got to go, instead of, tell me more. How did this work? Like, oh yeah, dinner party.
I'm obsessed with stuff like that.
Yeah, I think it's kind of fascinating, because people be people, no matter what, they're still people. So, like, you remember how, like, odd maybe teenagers were when you were a teen? They've never stopped being that odd or lonely.
Historical erotica is also a thing. I just want to put that out there.
Yes, very much.
But I mean,
How
but
much
also
is
that
it a thing? There are caves, not just in Europe. There are caves in Asia. You can go look at it. It's all rude. That's how much erotica has always been popular. And I'm like, fascinating, but go on. Okay.
I mean, like, but also historical fiction is a great way to see how humans don't change very much. How we express ourselves will change over time. Like there's a YouTube channel we love to watch. I can't remember.
Give me a hint.
Okay, her dad came up with fashion forecasting.
So that is Ultimate Fashion History. That's the channel. She also has a wonderful Facebook group that is free as well. Highly recommend. I cannot recommend Amanda Halley and her fashion history lectures enough. She goes all the way back to Neanderthal days in her, and they are 1 to 2 hour lectures. So they are so entertaining. They're slideshows. She actually, most of these eras, she does a silhouette of the fashion to really bring it home to you. And then, her phrase that she says again and again is, fashion is not an island. It's I think she says it's a reaction.
Yeah, it's a reaction.
It's a reaction to the times and the place. So it is a way also to learn a lot about human history.
But like
I wish there was somebody like her doing Asian history and African fashion history. I would absolutely love to learn African history through fashion and Asian history through fashion, mostly because I also like all the outfits. But I would love to learn like all the historical references in the clothing. It's so odd. I just keep praying it'll happen,
But like one of the things she points out is, so we haven't seen the same kind of fashion changes in the last 40 years that we usually saw every decade with the younger kids. And part of that is ready-to-wear clothes popularity, but also our culture has changed. We do not show our individuality as much through our clothing like we used to. We now show it through our online presence. But, however much we talk about, kids on TikTok and whatever you want to call the latest thing that, teenagers and younger are up to, humans have always been doing. We just expressed it differently. But we have always had the same needs. So that's the fun of historical fiction is, all right, how did teenagers be teenagers even before the invention of teenagers? How did humans meet each other and go on quote-unquote dates when you couldn't date?
I learned from Amanda Halley and her Ultimate Fashion History. I actually learned more from her about the U.S. South American diplomacy and political agreements during World War II and directly after World War II than I have ever learned by reading any article or any book about this time period. I learned more from her 20-minute lecture on this and why, what was it? The Three Caballeros cartoon. Why did that exist? It was essentially subsidized by the U.S. government, and they flew a bunch of Disney animators down to South America for this. I learned so much about U.S. foreign policy during World War II and directly after World War II from Amanda Halley talking about fashion than I have ever learned. And believe me, our father was fascinated with this time period. And he used to tell us all sorts of his stories about history and what was going on. But he did not tell it as well, at least. Let alone, he was not able to really bring it home in a way that I could relate to.
Yeah.
The way Amanda Halley did in her lecture. So again, it's another way to tell stories with a historical context. It's another way to ignite an interest. I highly recommend just exploring history and finding people who tell you about history in an exciting way, and then asking yourself as a writer, how can I inject a little bit of this into my writing? Because you don't have to be writing a historical story to inject a little historical fiction into your story.
So I have a hot take on this.
Yeah.
Historical fiction, steampunk is where historical fiction and science fiction overlap.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or in some cases, time travel.
Yes. That can also be a little bit more fantasy, like with Diana Gabaldon. But there's a lot of ways that it can happen. And I think that's the beauty of historical fiction, is that you can really take it anywhere.
Yeah. There was a, I can't remember again her name.
Give us
YouTube person. She originally made a YouTube channel just to spend 40 minutes bashing the live action Mulan movie.
What is her name? Something like Zhao Jie Xiao.
Zhao.
Yeah. Thank you. Because I'm bad with names on a good day.
I am terrible with that. I butchered it as well because I'm terrible with Mandarin.
Mandarin is so.
Forgive me for any mispronunciation of Asian names. Asian alphabets are unintelligible for this blind person. Forgive me.
It is a challenge.
You know what? You can do Finnish and a few other Scandinavians, so you got one down more than us.
Finnish, Hungarian, and maybe Russian. Maybe.
And those are definitely their own kind of. Well, that's a different way to pronounce. So, but the reason I bring up Zhao, is that
I'm pulling up a link.
Is that both in the one where she talks about Mulan, historically, but also her recent video about how she memed her book into being more popular and getting onto New York Times.
And to the New York Times bestseller list.
Is she brings up the historical fiction stories that inspired her stories.
Here it is.
Of how
her YouTube channel link there. Highly recommend.
Of how,
she's a wonderful storyteller.
Not just, historical facts, but also historical stories. She then sort of repurposed because these are some stereotypes and memes that, cultural ones that people will have a slight familiarity, but not too much. that she can then run with and create her own stories that are also very popular.
Yep. I was saying when I was muted, you saw my mouth moving and you couldn't hear me, was that oftentimes sci-fi and fantasy will use his actual historical fiction and pop it into their fantasy or sci-fi world. So I love it when I'm reading something, I'm like, oh, I know what this event is replicating. It's kind of cool.
I would like to point out, I put a link in here for the video that got me hooked on her channel. And this is part 1. So there's it's a 2-part video of how a nun became China's only female emperor. This is pretty much exactly how my family tells stories. This is how we tell history to each other or anything. It's like, we tell it in this salacious, then you would not believe what then happened next. Only it's about long dead people often. And this is like how my family just like has, this is our small talk, y'all. This is literally, this is how we just pass the time. We don't talk about weather.
That's my mom as well. Mom is like a history nerd, and she just starts talking and no one can stop her, and we can be 3 days on the phone, and it's like, what the hell?
Exactly.
What are you guys talking all day? It's like, well, mom is telling me stories about whatever she remembers at the time.
So like it's a 2-parter. If you like the first part, then you'll love the second part. There are visual aids. She does have little visuals show up. They are from soap operas. They're from Chinese and I think also Korean soap operas of the historical, time periods only. So that's what she's using for pictures. But definitely save this as a tab to watch later or however you want to. We'll put it in a comment with all the links that we've used today so that you don't have to, save it if you're like, but my computer, it'd be so slow. We'll have it. Tom will pop it up into a comment for y'all so you can see all the links later. But this way of telling a story, like I actually was already familiar with the story about the only female emperor, but she's the best telling I've ever heard of this woman's life. And since I was already very familiar with this woman's life, I did not know that this 2-parter was a lead into. So I also wrote a book, and it's coming out soon, called Iron Widow. And I was like, I am not mad at all.
I also wanted to mention, while we're on this vein, about the biggest pirate fleet was actually headed up by a woman. And she was so powerful that at the end of it, they were just like, make peace with us, and we'll thank you and good night. But I mean, stuff like that, there are a ton of stories that you can pull out and add in your own fiction and lore about their life, how you think it might be while using an existing story or doing a retelling. But I did want to mention one of the first historical fiction books that I read is actually, I believe it's translated from German, and it's called The Hangman's Daughter. It is the first book in a series. I have not read the series. I only read the first book, but it is incredibly detailed and in an unusual time period for most historical fiction that I have seen and read. And
is that by Oliver Posh? I'm not sure how to pronounce that.
Yes.
Okay.
And what's the name?
Oliver Potzsch.
I'll see it written and I will give it to you.
And it's set in 1659. So as I don't remember who was saying this before, but historical fiction goes all the way back.
You can go anywhere you want to go.
But yeah, like for everyone who thinks that they don't like history, it's often because, like so many things, we only got exposed to it in school in very dry, boring, sanitized ways.
Yep,
it's true. I mean, right now, so I finished Alexander Hamilton by Ron Chernow, and I'm reading Grant by Ron Chernow, and he's also written a book about George Washington, which I'm going to read after that. And they're about 1,000 pages each.
Yeah.
And I just take my time, but they cover in great detail a lot of things. So even though I know a lot of people don't find them interesting, it really depends on what you're looking for. And because Grant was president in the time period shortly before what I'm writing about, it sets the historical precedence, because even when you're writing historical fiction, in order to set the tone, you need a little bit of background on what happened before. But there's also the time periods between all the wars that people don't really write as much about. And those are great opportunities for settings where you have a lot of things that just finished happening, and you can provide a lot of context based on those things without having to ground your story in the actual midst of war.
Yes, I just
was saying,
finished
it. Like what was it? I can't remember her name, but I want to say it was like the 1890s when, the first woman to travel around the world on her own. It was for a newspaper.
Oh gosh, her name.
And then it ended up actually being a competition that she didn't even know she was in with another woman.
Oh yeah.
For a moment, I thought Amelia Earhart, but no, that's not her.
No. That's a fly around.
Jean Barrett.
Yeah.
She just she traveled by boat and by train and everything, and she would send back articles to her newspaper as she traveled around.
Or is it Jessica Nabongo?
No.
No.
But there are all these fun things that go on in history that do not require war to be of interest.
True.
This is a thing that keeps me kind of away from a lot of historical things, is because people have a soft spot to talk about war and war this and war that and war whatever, and I'm like, I want to read about something else every now and then, please. It would be great. I don't know. I mean, it also trickles down to sci-fi and fantasy. There's a war against aliens, war against dragons, war against whatever, and I'm like, can we just talk about something other than war? I understand that war is the only constant in human society. I understand, but can we just take a moment and look at other things? Because humans are interesting beyond just whatever they are fighting for at the time.
I mean, there's so. Or to just even focus in a different way of like all the economic wars, all the economic battles, different groups did with each other as they were trying to improve their nation versus others.
Pirates of the Caribbean with the East India Trading Company. It was.
I mean, truly. Hi, let's introduce you to the Dutch.
Yeah.
Like, good Lord.
But yes, there were some, there was the attack on the city, but it wasn't an all-out war with the claws, dude. Sorry. There wasn't an all-out
claw covers for him.
Yeah.
Make it like rainbow colored, so he's very annoyed.
He would hate that so much. He's just like trying to get comfortable in my lap, and he's like, let me just use all my claws so I can shift into a more comfortable.
He's letting you know that your lap could do with improvement.
Making it full of holes.
But yeah, like there's so much fun stuff in history to talk about, and it is find someone who's got an entertaining way to talk about it.
But also, like, you can really, I have enjoyed many actually historical fictional stories where it's just like regular people's lives in a regular town. However, they will talk about what's in the news, what's in the newspaper. And because it's part of topic of conversation is whatever's headlining in the newspaper. And that's so you have regular people who will be talking about something of interest to them from their time period that's in the newspaper, and they can have a conversation. Your characters can have conversation about it. But for the most part, there ain't nothing wrong with a good old Merchant and Ivory type costume drama.
Yep.
In your fiction, look, it's fun. It's fun to imagine all the outfits. It's fun to imagine all the different mannerisms and the little cottagey houses or the big palace, whatever you want.
Yeah, and for me, a lot of it is the setting. You can have a girl going through whatever her drama is and tell me all about the setting. I want to see how it's different. I want to see how she's got to go to the well and pull up the water because, she can't just turn on the faucet. Like normally, don't tell me that somebody went to go get water. I don't care. But if she's got to haul a bucket down and put it down the well and, just that, then it's different.
Tell me about how she's doing angry butter making.
She's like, my turn to churn the butter again. What?
I'm gonna get all the water out of this thing. I can't hit him, but I can hit that butter.
Yeah. I mean, there's that. There's a great way to introduce people. I mean, look at Anne of Green Gables. There's moving characters into an environment where they are very removed from worldwide situations, using old wives' tales to avoid certain illnesses that are going around. There are a lot of ways to set your story up to only keep the elements that you are interested in exploring. And I mean, you don't have to focus solely on trauma and suffering.
Yeah. Which is, again, sadly, one of the reasons why I've heard a lot of women of color don't want to write historical fiction. I'm like, oh, but you would write something amazing. They're like, I don't want to write a woman in slavery time. I'm like, don't write her in slavery.
Yeah, like, did you know there were free women?
Just don't do that.
Did you know that there were plenty of African women in other countries as well, and they were not enslaved? Like,
oh yeah,
there's, the world's your oyster. You can do it. And you know what? At a certain point, you can just change it. You can make it speculative fiction and just change the entire conversation. Have a grand old time.
This is actually nonfiction, but there's the story of Belle, and they made a movie about it. And her father was, I believe, an officer who had status and family, and he had a daughter who was biracial, and he went to his family and he took his daughter and he said, no, my daughter will have her birthright, which is my name, and you will treat her the way that she should be treated because she is my daughter.
Yeah, and his inheritance.
Yep, and she did. She had a dowry. There's the issues that she dealt with were a family assuming, well, because there is no equal to you in status, you'll be like the old maid aunt. But
it's who can you marry? You are black, but you are also the niece of this Lord Mansfield. And the daughter of this officer. So you have status, but also who would be your equal? Yeah, they couldn't figure it out.
I read about her like decades ago in the 90s. When I was going through, look, don't judge me, I was going through a Victoria Holt phase in my mid-teens. My local public library in Mississippi did not have a lot of options. And there's certainly drama in there. But, because I essentially was then looking up all these historical details mentioned in these Victoria Holt novels, I then found out about Belle, and I thought that was really interesting. Fast forward to, I don't know, 3 years ago. Hi, Charlie. And I was reading about how the British Parliament, the way they controlled India at the time in the 1700s and early 1800s was by holding various children of Mughal families hostage in England. Essentially as collateral to gain their submission in India. And so there was actually quite a bit of essentially teens and early 20-something very wealthy children, of Mughal families from India, also socializing with the upper crust because that was their social status. And I was like, oh, Belle would therefore have other people to socialize with. There's actually this very diverse social group for young people back then. And that was the, original idea I had for a Regency romance, was I could have all these young women who are sort of outcasts. They're sort of at odds, but they also are of equal social standing. So nobody blinks twice at them socializing, and I could just have them all together. And that way we could have all sorts of interesting conversations for the characters about their background and about their hopes and dreams and what they hope to do, while also, let's be honest, snogging each other. It was the romance I was working on.
I mean, I would read it, to be quite honest.
I think I've read some of it to you.
Yeah. And I feel like, I know it's almost time for a bio break, but that is something I wanted to get into, because Belle is not necessarily an anomaly. No, because in actual history, you have he was a composer and a captain in his father sent him to France to be educated because he was biracial, and he wanted to offer him some status and give him a profession and all of these things. And if you look at all of the portraits from that time, there were these people. I mean, you can tell their stories as well.
Come on, Three Musketeers.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. What about what's his name? Who I think he's like kind of in hiatus right now. But he is a art historian who likes to point out people of color in art.
Medieval POC on...
Yeah, I think so, yeah. We've talked about him a couple times.
Yeah,
and he's a wonderful resource, or at least his past work, or his past blog posts and stuff, are a wonderful resource for really seeing the less whitened side of art history, and to really see what's going on, because what do artists do? They paint the world they know.
Yeah, I would say whitewashing only occurred in the late 19th century.
Yeah, and whitewashing is fairly.
They literally went and whitewashed.
Yeah. Literally.
But yeah,
we can't have that.
But right? Up until the 19th
controversy
century,
still going on about Beethoven. I'm like, I'm curious where this will go.
Yeah, up until the late 19th century, there was a lot of color across Europe from around the world.
A lot of color in the Americas, and I'm talking about free people, which, not to somehow neglect enslaved people, but I just mean like the world was not just white. The English speaking world, at least, was not just white. It was very diverse. It was very colorful, and I think there was a lot more egalitarian view about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean. For people who think that everything was white, do you think people didn't travel before? Honey, really?
They really do think that. I had to
unfollow
someone on Instagram because
driving 15 minutes to the grocery store is too far, and I'm like, you have no idea what you will do when you don't have cable.
I mean, I've been through it. I've been through this in real life because I am kind of white passing sometimes, but I am a POC, clearly. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden I'm in Finland and I speak basic Finnish, and some of them were like, how? And I'm like, do you think people don't travel? Honey, seriously.
Duolingo, look it up. No, I'm teasing right now. I'm just teasing.
In Grant, one of the things that I have been very fascinated to find is that there are mention of people who worked very closely with generals, and one of them was I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but one of them was an African American man who worked closely with the military and ended up being elected to office. And where are our stories about people like that? Mm-hmm. There's even Grant's father refused to come to his wedding because Grant's wife's family were slave owners, and he was a staunch abolitionist. So there's a lot of stuff that's neglected in history and in those kinds of stories where, for example, Grant's father-in-law gifted Grant's wife, his daughter, 4 slaves when she got married, but he would not give them to her legally on paper because he knew that Grant would free them.
Yes.
And so there's all these kinds of nuances about how people could be one way and their partner could be another way. And Grant on his farm, he employed a lot of African American people, and it was interesting because he paid them the market wage for just for laborers, which would be unusual for the time.
Yes.
And so the stories where what were the lives of those people that he paid like within their community? When you think about it, they're making the same wages as would be expected for white laborers. What would that look like for their family and home? How would that improve their status in the community because they were able to make enough to actually raise families on and to have different stories? And what did everything come out looking like for them? I mean, even I just finished reading Where the Crawdads Sing, and there's that interesting connection between the white community and the African American community within that story. And even though there is still the animosity within the two communities, there's this balance that is struck based off of occupation. And talking about those areas where communities overlap and connections were forged. I mean, there was no other way for things to be done. It changes the view of the world, and it creates so many opportunities for wonderful fiction.
It really does. And what I love about, we are able to have this conversation this way, in part because independent publishing is now even more, has less gatekeeping than it's ever had before, really. And so it is so much more approachable. So we're not having to have a conversation of, well, we want to tell all these exciting stories, but how do we do it while pitching to traditional publishing? That is one of the ways to have the conversation, but it is not the only way, where 30, 40 years ago, it was primarily the only way to have the conversation.
Yeah. Hey, Charlie, and thank you for that. That comment by Charlie about the draw a Swedish person reminded me of one of my mom's stories, real life this time. So I'm not talking fiction here, but mom's story was when she went to Sweden, and she has a friend who's from Africa, and it's African but born in Sweden, like African parents. So the guy's black, but he speaks perfect Swedish. And mom was hanging out with this guy, and Swedish would come to her talking in Swedish, and she was like, no, I'm the tourist, talk to him. And it was
Or another thing people really don't talk about much is the Scots were going to Egypt to trade,
and
500 years ago.
Some of the Scottish stayed in Egypt because and some of the Scottish, recruited people to come back, some of the Egyptians, to move to Scotland, because humans will always find a way. I'm just saying. And that was not unusual. So yes, there are Scottish people to this day who on DNA tests are registering with at least, a couple digit percentages of Egyptian heritage. And when they're like, how is that even possible? And they're like, well, let me tell you about Scottish trading. The boat will take you everywhere.
That is, I believe it was my grandfather who had a bit of Scottish, which was funny because he was very dark. And even then, my grandmother was very light, and but they went to the same church. And so my grandfather was sitting near the back of the church, and he was kind of watching her. And someone said to him, what do you think you're going to do? Marry her? And he was like, actually.
Fun fact. But I mean, I feel like it says a lot. It also, as was pointed out in one documentary, I'm a sucker for a good documentary. It just so happens that the BBC does make a lot of good documentaries, even though I don't technically have an interest in that, Anglo-Saxon lifestyle. But I saw this one documentary about Scottish cuisine, and they talked about all this international influence on Scottish cuisine, and that it is not recent. Like some of it is recent influences, but for the most part, a lot of traditional Scottish dishes are in fact influenced by international cuisine, including, as they mentioned, Egyptian cooking, Mediterranean cooking, all these things, because when the Scottish went to do trading, they would come back with recipes. They would come back with people who knew how to cook this and then teach everyone else with their local ingredients. And this heavily influenced Scottish cuisine. And this explains why Scottish cuisine has, for hundreds of years, if not almost 1,000, been dramatically different from English cuisine, where they were very much about that English lifestyle. Just going to leave it at that. And on that note, because I'm going to say, hey, let's go ahead and go to a bio break. And then
tone of just going to leave it at that. That made me
just going to leave
so
it at
loud.
that. I know. As much as I love y'all know, I can talk about food for literally hours, if not days. How about we do a 10-minute break? It might be a great time to get something to drink.
Yes.
Brew a little tea. Some of that nano tea, all cozy. Now that we are deep into November now, and stretch maybe. I don't know. I'm throwing out here. Check the bladder, because it's good for your kidneys. And then we will come back here in 10 minutes, and then we will talk about more historical fiction genre writing tips, tricks, and we will talk about the problematic issues and shortcomings of historical fiction. So with that, let me play us the little interstitial. See y'all in a moment. Maybe beep, maybe beep, maybe beep, beep, beep. Boom. Although, I guess if I were being honest about how my mother used to do it, she used to sing a song to wake us up, specifically for me, the heavy sleeper. And it starts, good morning, morning glory, kissed and caressed by the dew. Beautiful morning glory, good morning, morning to you. Take out your headphones real quick. Good morning, glory! She used to yell it much louder. And I'd be like, what?
That's fantastic.
I have the opposite. I have a father who sends me video links of Finnish lullabies to sleep.
Nice.
That's so nice.
Yeah, I didn't have that as a kid, so we don't give a damn that I'm an adult. I have sleeping problems, and he's like,
Right.
"Yeah, when you go to sleep, there you go, Finnish lullaby," and it does
Really
help
nice.
actually.
That's nice.
There is a podcast, I think it's hosted on, I'm sure it's on other things, but it's on Audible for sure, and it's called Bore You to Sleep.
Nice.
And it is 100% effective. And the guy who did it, he's like, I have sleeping problems. I know other people do. So I made this podcast, and he just reads really, really boring stuff in the most monotone.
Oh no! Actually,
possibly imagine.
that doesn't work for me. That would send me into a complete despair. It's like, that's not a good narrator. You suck. I know it's on purpose, but still, my brain is like, no. I just cannot tolerate it. I like for sleeping. There is a tarot lady. You know, one of those that read tarot on YouTube and whatever. I don't even pay attention to that particular whatever she says because it's kind of repetitive. But the shuffling cards are very relaxing to sleep. And her videos are crap long. It's like 1 hour. I'm like, yeah, okay, 1 hour reading. There you go. I'm going to sleep.
I do like, there's one I like. Her name is Luna Innate, and she does ASMR things of that nature. And I really I love her channel. But I have to bounce around because sometimes I do ASMR. Sometimes I do this bore you to sleep. Sometimes I do EFT, and sometimes I do like the honest guys. It really just depends on what I'm needing.
It depends. I know I cannot. What I have learned though is do not put an audiobook to sleep because you will not fall asleep trying to read Andy Weir. You're going to stay awake until you finish the book. So no, that doesn't work.
Well, Maggie has been able to join us. Hello, sweetie. And Eva is back with good news that the little one doesn't like Kit Kats.
Rejoice.
Yes. Finally, there's at least something that you could totally help him with.
Yeah, you get all the Kit Kats. Yay.
Exactly. Charlie says, I have a podcast of Tony Shalhoub and his character from The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel reading scientific papers, drifting off to Scaredy. Excellent. Megan likes to listen to the Peaceful Guitar playlist on Spotify to fall asleep and shine. Very nice. I often will just let Doctor Who play. And I drift off. It's good stuff. But Doctor Who is my comfort show. So
yeah, that's a good one.
Eva likes to listen to Rainstorm to fall asleep. That's also excellent.
Those are so good too.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there is. There's one like kind of ambiance ASMR one on YouTube that I love. That's like 9 hours long, and I think it's a train ride through rain.
Oh yeah.
I was gonna say there's a train. I love the train. Yeah,
it's the train. Yeah, and it's like, and it really is. It sounds just like, because I took a sleeper car from. Well, I took one actually from Memphis to Chicago, and then from Chicago to Seattle when I was a teenager. That was how I wanted my trip to go to boarding school in Canada. Was I totally twisted all my family members' arms to get that, and it really does sound just like that if you're on a sleeper car.
There's a Trans-Siberian train recording in a blizzard, and that's the one I have picked. It's like, yay, train train through Russia. That's what I'm going to sleep with and probably have nightmares about it. But
so on the note of historical fiction, this one is fantastic to write to, but also fantastic to sleep to. And it is a carriage ride through the raining forest. And it's there's limited animation where like you can see the trees going by. And then there's a candle sitting on this little fold-out table in the carriage that flickers. And then the rest of it is just the sound of the rain and the carriage like creaking and rocking as you go down this kind of slightly bumpy path.
Nice.
And that gives me life.
Yes. That sounds really lovely. I haven't come across that one yet, but I will look for it. Yes. So here we are at the top of the second hour. We're both clicking on things. Tom, I swear, that one wasn't even me. That was Tom's word by himself because Tom is the sassy sibling.
Tom the tyrant?
Tom is the little brother.
To answer Eva, I would say sometimes it can, but not necessarily, but it can.
I would say, well, one, Diana Gabaldon does.
Mm-hmm.
But two, not necessarily like Mia said, and also it does inspire you to go find out what the actual history is.
Yes.
That.
I think that's where its real power is. Historical fiction is to inspire you to do your own research and to learn, like, well, what is the actual history of the story I just read? Like, what really happened?
Yeah, I
think that's powerful.
On Doctor Who. I've watched a Doctor Who episode or two and been like, oh, let me go back and look that up. But I like that kind of stuff.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's its real power is to kind of spark a bit of inspiration to go look it up yourself and learn on your own terms. Because I think that's where people
really did happen. And not a book, but the show about Mary, Queen of Scots. There were things in it that were just in the show. It's completely inaccurate. But sometimes they would mention somebody. I'm like, wait a minute, that was a real person. And then I would just look it up to see what their connection was, if it was an actual person in history, because the show, of course, was not at all accurate, but it was still very entertaining. Totally fiction based on a real person. But it sparks that curiosity where you're like, wait, did that happen? In some cases, okay, that didn't happen, but I still want to look this up. You know what I mean?
The White Queen is a great example. So it's a book. It's also been done as an, I think maybe a Stars series.
Yes, I think so.
And there is like a lot of the social stuff is made up because there's a lot of stuff we don't know.
Yep.
But then there's a lot of things like where people died and how they died that was based off of history. But in some cases where the history is debated, where there's like different theories on how things happen. And at this point, one of them, I believe, was where William the something or other was buried. And he is the historical figure off of which it is believed that the Hunchback of Notre Dame was based.
Okay.
And it was before everyone knew where he was actually buried, which, no, maybe it was Richard III, excuse me.
Yeah, I was about to say, are you talking about Richard III, who did not have a hump at all? That was, Shakespeare gave that to him, because they found him in a parking lot.
Yes, that's the one they found in a parking lot. And if anything, it was very slight.
In fact, he had fantastic teeth as well.
Yes.
Like he had beautiful straight teeth because it was before forks had been widely used in Europe. So he was, pulling his meat off the bone. So he had good teeth.
But for him, it was debated where he was buried or even how he died. And there were several different accounts of how he died. So up until he was found in this parking lot, which had been a church cemetery, no one knew. So it was pick your own adventure, really, when writing historical fiction. So those are some other super fun things that you can write about, is where, like, what happened to this person? What happened to this expedition? what happened to whatever group of people who disappeared, and choose your own adventure.
Yep. I love reading speculative fiction on like Virginia Dare and that whole thing, because they literally just dropped off the face of the earth. You know, it's like this whole group of people that still, what happened to all of them? And no one ever heard from any of them again. And then when they went to go look, the whole place was just like deserted.
Is this
So that's
the
the sad
Roanoke?
thing.
Is that the Roanoke community or a different one? So I also read an account that it was like, hey, you know how they said all these people disappeared? They actually moved in with the indigenous community.
I read that too, yeah.
And all just married in and moved on with their lives.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they would leave everything else behind because it wasn't needed.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So, I mean, I like that version of the story, but really,
I like that better than they all got some sort of plague and just died or starved to death because they weren't expecting the winter to be as hard as it was.
And I also would counter that by saying they all starved to death, so there should be one body. But, or, you know, if they had a plague or something, because...
Or maybe the Native Americans went and were like, let's clean this place out because dead sick bodies are gross. We need to get rid of that. Who, you know?
But there should be graves.
There should be, but where would the graves be?
And we know
what if there
that
are graves and we just haven't
we
found
know
them
that
yet?
it was considered sacred. So if they cared enough to bury them, they would do some kind of something.
This is true.
So
I'm sorry. So this is what history does. It's very fascinating. About the problem with historical fiction having so much cultural misappropriation, the assumption that all non-white groups act according to tropes and stereotypes. I say in today's day and age, why are you still making everybody stereotypical? We know better now. I think there was a time when you would be writing when you wouldn't know necessarily other groups, so you would write what you know, and that stuff maybe was contemporary at the time, and now we see it as historical fiction. But I think you write what you know and you write what you have access to research. So, but now I don't feel like there's really any excuses for that type of thing now.
I mean, I think there are some contexts where...
For appropriation, just really or misappropriation.
I think there are some contexts where it's difficult to contact someone from a specific group to actually get an interview to have a real conversation about it. Mm-hmm. And there are still a lot of cultures that are not documented very well in writing because the books on the subject are out of date. And so I think there are some problems around that. But I think within the United States, the cultures that are most often misappropriated and villainized, we do have enough now to not. And so the people who do that, it's just like, you know, don't read their stuff. But I don't think that means to write off the genre. Just to pay attention and really support the people who do a good job of removing those notions.
Those negative stereotypes. Unfortunately, I think a lot of the people who would do it and not care, their readers also don't care. So they're kind of like perpetuating that circle while the people on the outside are screaming, please don't do this. That's not right. That's inaccurate. You're making us look bad for no reason. But the people in that circle, they're like, well, I'm writing for these readers and these readers really don't care about you guys. So I'm making my money. And you get that sometimes, and people will, and you see it. They completely ignore. People will be on Twitter or wherever saying, "Hey, I don't know if you knew, but you're doing this," and they're like, "Eh," and then people get mad at them, and they're still like, "Eh," But look, I just sold 1 million books, so why am I going to change? You know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, like, you were talking about, Fine Vines. I was just thinking about, what they discovered about, what was it, the Donner Party? Of, classically, they try to put the local Native American groups as, being hostile versus...
There were two different tribes that the Donner Party had the potential to have contact with, and both of these tribes have surviving members, and noted in their own histories the Donner Party and their difficulty with trying to assist the Donner Party.
Yeah.
They kept both tribes did not know about the other tribe because they actually came different weeks, different 2 or 3 week period, because they were both on their migration south for warmer climes in this, that they came across the Donner Party. But both of them tried to leave food out for the Donner Party. Both of these tribal groups tried to leave food out because it was very obvious these people were starving, they were stuck, and they were not going to make it through the winter with the resources they had, like their housing and tenting and everything. So both of them tried to make contact by leaving food and tried to actually physically say, hello, we are here, can we help you? And everybody in the Donner Party was not appreciative and to be downright hostile to these two different tribes as they moved to warmer areas for the winter.
And literally would kick away the food and just ruin the food that was left
Refuse to eat it. Yeah. So no, these people were set on eating people. It's like I used to say in the education program. You can lead a student to knowledge, but you can't make them think. No, the Donner Party definitely was into cannibalism, philosophically, versus receiving outside help.
As a sidebar back to what Maggie was saying, I think that is also a reason why it's important for minorities to start writing more historical fiction.
Amen.
I know I say a lot. I talk about Diana Gabaldon a lot, just an absolute ton. And there are so many reasons why her books are fantastic. If you look at her education, you can see so much of her education coming out in her books. But also, she is biracial.
Mm-hmm.
And that care you can see come out in her books from the way that she portrays her characters and the amount of diversity that she has in her cast of characters. And I think that she's opened the way for a lot more fiction in that style and shown that it's very possible to be very successful while writing that.
Absolutely. I feel like it's a similar problem such as women in STEM. It's hard to get, let alone retain, women in the sciences and maths. But that, to me, has more to do with they're not encouraged from the start. And the few that get there are like, this place sucks. And then they find other careers because they are very smart people and are like, I'm not wanted here. And this is not worth the effort. This is not worth walking uphill for the rest of my career. This is not worth this. And they go, to greener pastures. I do not blame them at all. I feel like it's very similar in writing, that there's not a lot of encouragement for pretty much any minority group, any kind of background, to write, to let alone publish, and to pursue that, even, God forbid, as a career. And then even when you get there, you're like, this is a whole heck of a lot of work, and there's not that much support. That's why I, again, point out it's so important to build community for yourself as a writer, so that when, you have your moment or your crisis of faith, there's other people to go, no, keep going, Glory. I'm talking about myself here yesterday. I'm talking directly about me. And how I was like, no, Tom, nobody ever reads my stuff. There's no point. I'm not doing it. Tom's like,
That's how I feel every other day, basically.
Yeah, exactly. But when you have a community around you, it's a little bit easier. I'm not saying that it takes away all the troubles. It doesn't. But it does help keep you moving forward as soon as you do feel stronger, you know? And that is the only real solution I have so far for that. Is the only way to keep moving forward is you have a community behind you rooting for you. So every time you look back and go, why am I still trying this effort? You've got a whole community to go, we're right here waiting for you. We want to celebrate every success with you.
There's a couple of things that I would also like to point out. This can go two different ways. Thomas Hardy had a real struggle with a lot of his books, and a lot of them were banned for really minor infractions. And then we have Picture of Dorian Gray, and the name, it's right there, by
something Scottish.
The dude who wrote it. It's by the dude who wrote it.
Or was it something Welsh?
It was the doctor. It was what's his name's doctor?
You've not narrowed that down like
Byron. It's Byron's doctor that he invited to come along, because Dorian Gray is sort of based on Byron.
Fair. Okay. So we have that book, and we know what happened to Dude because he wrote it. But what we can say about it is that he was well ahead of his time.
Yes.
But he also opened up an avenue and a kind of, I wouldn't say he opened up necessarily the genre, but made a bit more diversity within the genre. And now, I mean, people are still reading the book. So just because there isn't support in the moment doesn't mean that you should give up on it or stop writing it. I know there's not a lot of incentive to be like, well, you'll be famous after you die. I mean, nobody wants that, but if the story has to be told, the story has to be told.
Mm-hmm.
So pick up the pen.
Yes.
And it does help to just have different perspectives. I mean, Byron was apparently not that pleased with, the stereotyping of his behavior, even though, his friend and doctor's like, but I've literally seen you say that to women. I just put in what you said.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, well, you didn't have to write it down.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's great lie of it does help with our perspective on things. If, versus if you only ever hear it from the people who are doing well in society.
What I like is the idea of writers writing for their younger self. Write for the person you once were who really needed this story and it wasn't there on the shelf for you. Write for that person, that young person who was still hopeful, was still fresh in the world, and still believed anything was possible, but was right on the cusp of realizing that, that the world is harsh. The world is not kind necessarily, not as a world anyway. Right before the disillusionment. Right for that person, right before the disillusionment happened. And because maybe you can bring that in for the next generation.
I'm taking an alternative for what you're for the suggestion you're dropping right now. I'm writing for the adults who didn't have those books. As hey, it's not too late for you either. Like, it's never too late to heal. So that's for the people I'm writing for. I'm not writing for younger audiences because I don't know how to write it in a simple fashion. And Tom, you have seen my plots. You know what I'm trying to say. I just don't have the English words for it right now. It's not for young people what I write. And I don't know how to put it for young people.
I read very adult books when I was a teenager in middle school and high school. I read books for much older people, and that wasn't a question. In fact, most adults didn't even question, other than, that's a rather advanced book. And I'm like, it's about adults, whatever.
Yeah.
But, not to like, dumb it down. That's not what I'm trying to say. But just for that younger person, before they became disillusioned with, there's nothing for me, there's no place for me on these shelves. That is not necessarily the truth now. And you can start by writing that. Because it will never get onto the shelf if you don't start writing it.
The other side of that as well is my family, I was not allowed to read fiction. I didn't start reading fiction until I was 16. So everything that my dad read to us, and he read a lot to us, it was all for adults. And I think I was probably 10, 11 when I realized that my dad was, when he would act like, we would think he was falling asleep at first.
Mm-hmm.
And what he was doing was reading ahead when he realized something was not child appropriate. And from the time that I figured out what he was doing, my brother and I would like joke about it for a while. And then I was like, wait, I know where the book is that we're reading every night. Let me go back and see if he was falling asleep or if he was skipping something. And then I figured out he was skipping something. And that specific book was Papillon. I don't know if anyone else has read that.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's definitely not, that has adult themes. Let's put it that way.
It has a lot of adult themes. And I went back and I read every single one of them as a 10, 11-year-old and told no one. My brother knew because, he was there and saw what I was doing. He didn't care. He wasn't interested. He was reading The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire when he was 13. He was like, please leave me alone. He was just glad that I found something to read that made me leave him alone. But I was like, I can have more. But there was also no way for me to communicate to my parents, hey, this is an adult book, a very adult book. I did like it. I would like more of this.
I have to go.
Okay.
All right, Dal.
All right,
See you later, Dal.
Bye.
See you later, Dal.
Have a good one, guys. Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Yes, you do have to edit for children. But if they're still interested in that story later, they will revisit it.
I say, as a childless ogre, this is just my opinion. I know how I was as a kid, but if kids are old enough to ask questions, they're old enough to get the answers. And even if you're not ready as a parent to have the conversation, they're going to go find the answers themselves. So it's really just a matter of where you are. But I don't think I was traumatized or in any way harmed by the things that I read that were not necessarily specifically child appropriate. But I've always been a little bit pervy. So there's that.
Well, also, like, when a child is reading it, if they don't have a capacity to understand it, their brain will just edit it.
Yeah.
Like, they'll just skim over it. They didn't understand it. That's how human brains work. Adults do it too. We don't consciously do it, but if we just have no basis to understand a concept, we just skip over it mentally. And it's like we forgot it even existed. And that's how humans work.
Yeah.
So
sometimes things will click and register later. Once you see it again, you're like, oh, that's what that thing was.
That was sort of the whole point in, what was it, The Princess Bride?
Yes.
No, we don't need to skip the kissing part now.
Right?
When the hormones finally hit.
So I've always been morbid. I've always been interested in medical things. There was like an anatomy book, and I could not read. I didn't learn to read well until I was 9. I was very, very dyslexic. But I would go and I would pull an anatomy book off of the shelf. It was like an encyclopedia. So it was in a section in the back of one of the encyclopedias. And it was just the dissections.
Yeah.
In different various spaces.
Those clear pages with the color organs and things. That was so much fun.
And I would pore over those pages. And my brother was like, what actually is wrong with you? And I'm saying this, this started when I was about 6 years old. So if you wanted to get my attention when I could not read and you didn't have a picture book, even if there were like story books, I couldn't read them, so I didn't care. And that was my entertainment, was looking at anatomy books.
Yep.
And
I love looking at those too. I loved that when I was a kid, like a kid, a little kid, like toddler, was like the hard part was learning to be gentle with the clear plastic pages and not pull on them a little. But I loved that overlay situation. Oh, it was
those
so
were
cool.
fantastic.
I was gonna, yep, we had those. They were great, and you get to just see every layer. They were nice. Yes.
Yeah, and it was like, and some of the really high quality books would actually have those clear plastic pages double printed. So you'd also get to see the other side of the organ on some of them. On the, it was like, oh, this is. So like when you flipped it the other way, you then saw a different aspect of anatomy.
You take the whole like 6 pages and look at them this way, and you can look at the back of them and go backwards. Those were the best.
Like they were so cool.
Yeah. So when
if you're under 20 on the stream, we didn't have internet, so that's what we had to do.
That's why it's historical fiction now.
Yeah,
that was
talk about our childhood,
but
before the internet.
True facts, and also this is why when there were certain episodes on Oprah, I think there was one, and it was a cancer awareness month, I think, and there was a specific episode that was talking about testicular cancer, and my parents and grandparents all shooed me out of the room and were like, you don't need to hear this. And I was like, no, I'm interested. And they were like, you don't. And I was like, what's a testicle? I'm like, I was probably 6 or 7.
That's exactly what they didn't want to talk about.
Yes. So of course I was even more curious. And of course, there's in between the news, there are all the ads for tonight on Oprah at 4. And I was like, I have to know. Like, I was miserable with the fact that there was a great mystery that no one would tell me. So I pretended to be very cooperative so that they wouldn't disrupt my plans. And I took something. I said I was going to bed early, maybe. I don't know, going to take a nap or something. And then I went into my mom's room, which was right next to the dining room kitchen area. And I closed the door and I curled up right at the bottom of the door and I pressed my ear to the door and I listened to the entire special. And I didn't have a lot of context, but I understood, hey, this is really important. This can kill a lot of guys. Because nobody talks about it. Why won't they let me talk about it? Because we talk about breast cancer all the time, and we did. But this was a kind of cancer that I'm not allowed to know about? What do you mean?
The most forbidden cancer. Like, really, though?
Of course, if I had been able to read my anatomy books, I would have known.
Yes. The whole thing is silly. I mean, like, I was aware of things like that because I changed Tom's diaper when he was little. And if you've ever changed a little boy's diaper, a little baby boy's diaper, you know that you got to make sure them puppies get dry because you do not want diaper rash back there on the little testicle. Oh, they get so inflamed. It's terrible. So it's very important. Whenever I was a nanny, especially with little boys, I would always have a blow dryer on the diaper changing table. So I could just have it on cool and blow them dry because we live in a very humid climate down here. You do not want a rash. But to try to prevent that knowledge from anyone, like as if you're not going to notice boy dogs have balls.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and once the kid hears it, you gotta say something because
like you're making it even more salacious than it actually is. It's just, but yeah, I think adults are kind of strange. Children, I like how matter of fact they are. They're just like, oh yes, that is the world I live in. Because like you could tell them magic is real, and they'll be like, now things make more sense. Like they would just accept it. There's that very kind of well-known the Calvin and Hobbes little daily comic one where Calvin's father explains that everything used to be in black and white like in real life. That's why all the pictures are in black and white. And then there was the great changeover when everything went color. But why are some of the pictures still in black and white? Oh, that's because everything was actually in black and white. They were actually color pictures, but things were black and white.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got this whole explanation, and it's fantastic. And he's like, "Oh, well, I guess that does explain a lot." It's like that's how kids are.
Yeah, and a lot of times you can just give them the really quick brush answer, like, "Oh, your brother and your dad have those, so we just got to make sure that that they're healthy, just like the rest of us, and keep it rolling." Most kids are like, "Okay." I mean, the occasional kid will want the details, but most kids, they're like, "Okay, I know what that is then."
Well, if they had just told me that, I probably wouldn't have been like, "Oh, okay."
Must go research myself.
And I would not have been as interested as since they made
it would have been boring if it was just like, "Oh, that's boy bits."
Mm-hmm. But that's why I wanted to learn to read as well, is because I knew there were a great many secrets within those pages, and no one would tell me.
Mm-hmm. I agree. It's that forbidden fruit thing that just makes it that much more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I've always, our parents did that about vegetables, and it made Tom and me love vegetables because it was forbidden.
You're not allowed to have vegetables.
You're not allowed to have adult vegetables. You can only have children vegetables.
I like that strategy.
So Brussels sprouts were forbidden to children because these are very special fairy cabbages. They are too amazing for little children.
Children wouldn't really appreciate the taste of these.
Fairies pick these cabbages, and then they sell them for profit to adults. So, we would never let you, a mere child, have such expensive vegetables. Those are just for mommy and daddy. And we were like, I want to try it. Like, no. You can try it when you're older. There was a lot of vegetables that were strictly for mom and dad, and we weren't allowed to have any, and that was what made us want to try it even more. We would sneak bits off their plate when they weren't looking, after dinner, because I was usually in charge of washing dishes. And that whole forbidden fruit thing, that is powerful for humans. So just remember, whatever you make forbidden fruit for your child, that is the thing that they will always pursue. So, and because that did work on us, my parents then did the inverse. When I was in middle school, I had no curfew. As a high schooler, I had absolutely no curfew. I was very mad about it. And I told my parents that they were ruining my teenage experience by not giving me a curfew by which to rebel against.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, what kind of curfew do you want? And I'm like, I don't know. What do you think is appropriate? And they're like, okay, be back before 4 a.m. And I'm like, no, again, you're being too lenient. You're depriving me of my teenage experiences. I will only get to be a teenager this one time.
Yes.
And you are ruining it for me. And they're like,
tip to very lenient parents, sometimes your curfew is giving your kid an out.
So my parents were
just so you know, sometimes
super strict about everything. And there was one time where we were at a friend's house and we played Rook.
Mm-hmm.
Literally all night, as in the sun was coming up and our friend dropped us off at home. And I slid into bed as my dad was getting up to start his morning.
Nice.
So there was no way he didn't hear us.
Right.
It was impossible. And he got up, went about his morning, and nary a word was ever spoken about this incident. Whereas our friend, who then had a 30-minute drive back home, was grounded for the next month and couldn't believe that our parents, who were typically much stricter, had not even mentioned it to us. He was like, how is this possible? We were like, we also do not know.
Yes. I was very upset. I was like, Mom and Dad, how will you know if I'm safe? They didn't even want me to wake them up when I would get home or let them know the next day. I was like, what if I just disappeared? What if somebody disappeared me in a van? And they're like, well, we trust you to be smart enough not to get into people's vans who, seem dangerous. And I was like, that's not how child abduction works.
My brother shared a post the other day that cracked me up. It was like, I'm not stupid. I'll only get into their van after they show me the candy.
Right? Yeah, like you didn't have to show me your sacks. Yeah, show me the puppies now. Don't just play a recording.
I don't believe you got puppies.
Right? No. But Like they were just like, Glory, you're fine. And I was so upset. I had anxiety about I could just be disappeared and my parents wouldn't notice for like a week. Like,
yeah. I told my kids, I said, someone always needs to know where you're at, and I'm going to give you. They had a curfew, and I said, if you want to do something though, and my kids always know they can negotiate with me. That's how I know when they really want to do something. But there have been a number of times where my daughter would come out, oh, thank God, Mom, I did not want to go do that. The pressure, and just like, oh, can't, because that's going to go way too late. My parents have given me a curfew. Sometimes give your kids an out, but if they really want to do something, hear them out. Like, if you can explain to me why this is a good idea for you to do this, I'm gonna be like, okay, we could be a little lenient this time.
I agree, Maggie.
And it helps for kids to learn to negotiate.
I realized when I was a kid that I had a weakness for bookmobiles. More than a few times, I just rode along with a bookmobile for a day. Like, here, I'll just be your librarian while you drive around. Helping people find books as a book fan. Yeah, I had a problem. But yeah, like, well, my parents very much were like, Glory was always independent. In fact, Tom and I've talked about it recently. I'm like, how come Mom and Dad treated you so different? Don't you think that was strange? Tom's like, I think they realized from the very start you were just so independent, and you know, Tom and our little sister were not like that. They were not that independent. So instead, I was the one who got to set their curfews and got to be the one of like, wake me up when you get home. Like, I was always their parent, even when I was a teenager.
Or at least call, make sure we know where you are, which friend you're with.
And then I would call later to verify that is actually where they were. Like, I would call at 11 o'clock at night. The parent would be like, why are you calling me? I'm like, I'm checking to make sure Tom is here. And he's like, who's Tom? I'm like, you better be in your den or somewhere else, or your child, and Tom are about to get such an earful. And he's like, I will find a child. Which one are you looking for? Yeah. And I was like, you need to train your children to start answering the phone if you're going to sleep. Somebody needs to be on call. I was that kind of teenager.
I don't know what any of this has to do with historical fiction, but I'm highly entertained.
We just get roundabout, but yeah, to
We
wrap up
do.
the second hour, acknowledging problematic issues and shortcomings of the genre. I think we've kind of covered the parts of you don't have to explore the truly deep, dark bits of human history. If that's not what appeals to you, or you as a writer do not want to delve into it, that is perfectly okay. And it's still valid, whatever it is that you want to write about. What other problematic, well, I mean, racist people be racist, and you can tell their racism in their writing. Like,
yeah.
Sexist people be sexist, and it's very obvious this is a misogynist who wrote it when you're reading it. Like,
so you know what? You can actually write where people are actually nice and helpful to someone, even a random person.
Yes.
I think a good example of how that can be done and has been done before is in Anne of Green Gables. The brother and sister who both have their reasons for not being married. And I mean, there's no question that Marilla ran the house.
No question.
There was never a question about that.
Never a question.
And also people in the community really couldn't. I mean, in a lot of ways, Marilla reminds me of my aunt with that fierce independence, but also, I mean, as a kid, when I was 16 and I was staying with my grandfather because my grandmother was in the hospital doing rehab from a stroke, and he had dementia and Alzheimer's, and they really just needed someone to go around the house and lock the doors and make sure the gas stove hadn't been left on a couple times a day. And there was a family friend who started to question me about that. Are you even old enough to be here by yourself? Blah, 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 blah. And I was like, maybe you should just talk to my aunt. And I handed her the phone. And there was a solid 5 minutes of her just standing there going, during which my aunt absolutely blessed her out. And when she hung up the phone, she said, well, your aunt said it's fine.
Yep.
The point being, those kinds of women have always existed.
Amen.
There's a story of the couple who lived together in a community openly, the two of them, always, and were buried next to each other, and it was known that they were a couple, more or less, and nobody had anything to say about it, really. They were good, upstanding members of the community, and they minded their own business. And those kinds of people have always been around. So to say, yes, there were communities where that kind of relationship, they would have been driven out and nearly burned at the stake. But that wasn't every community.
Right. No, and if you want to write that story, write your story in a community where that didn't happen.
Exactly.
Where they could live and mind their business.
And if you're concerned about how readers are like, oh, but I feel like you're, overlooking this other, you can literally just put an afterword in. Mm-hmm. Acknowledging that you chose to write about a different community for this couple because you wanted a happy story. Mm-hmm. You wanted to go be in this happy village for a novel or for a story length. This is what you wanted, and it's for writers who want this, but acknowledging that was not always the case. Mm-hmm. And that if you are interested in that, may I recommend some other books instead of it is perfectly fine. So in Library Land, we have the philosophy. It is still controversial, unfortunately, but the philosophy is a reader for every book and a book for every reader. And what that means is that we don't yuck other people's yums, and we try to stock a little bit of everything for every kind of reader. Mm-hmm. So that there is a book, or hopefully a bunch of books, for every kind of reader looking for every kind of story. Mm-hmm. At least within reason, Again, you don't tolerate me, I don't tolerate you, but I'm just saying.
Oh, Lucky, hi, buddy.
Hello, Chidi.
Something outside was bothering him, so.
No.
Instead of having him bark endlessly, I figured out it's okay.
All the furry babies here. So, I think that, the problematic issues and shortcomings of the genre, there aren't necessarily. It's more has to do with the writers themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To Maggie's question, I'm a personal fan of the trope. I know that it has the potential to be very offensive to a lot of people. That's why I like to write it. I like to offend people with my writing. It is a personal flaw. But I think that the importance there is how the relationship is approached, because if you think about it, there are a lot of things. Another example of a forbidden romance, which is taking it in a different context, is between Wallace Simpson and what's his face, who resigned his title to the throne.
Was it Edward?
King Edward or Prince? Yeah. Was he king already? King Edward.
Yeah,
I think he did become.
So he had to
abdicate.
Mm-hmm. Abdicate in order to marry her. Now, if there's a movie about it, I can't remember the name of the movie. I think it was W.E. W period E period, and it explored some interesting things about the relationship, as in there's times where he starts to go home and he has to leave her in order to do so. And her response to that of him renouncing his title, abdicating the throne, and basically being shunned by his family all this time wasn't enough for her. And should it have been? Should she not be offended when he goes away for months to see his family and he can't take her with him? And exploring those kinds of things within forbidden romance, because there's the aspect of, and they lived happily ever after, versus a soldier in the Civil War marrying a woman who has been freed. What does that look like?
Yeah.
I want to know. How were they able to exist in either world? Or do they become completely isolated? Or what kind of resentment and animosity do they hold against each other? Because these are real stories.
You ever gonna write the forbidden story, Glory?
People might not like those stories, but they did
things.
happen. So why not fictionalize it and give how you think it might have played out?
Okay.
And I have a
my
story
thing
like
is,
that
I
in
don't
mind.
like when it gets gross or like there's just some aspects of it that could be highly problematic where I'm like, for me personally, I veer away from that. But yeah, it
there is a different aspect I did forget to mention about problematic issues and shortcomings of the genre. And here it is. And this is also, I guess, a controversial take, but so bad. It is not necessary to become a PhD in this subject matter before you feel validated enough to write about it. You really do not have to.
Totally.
That is something gatekeepers do. And again, I want to help people get away from that and do not let that be a roadblock to your creative energy.
Mm-hmm.
In part because once you've zero drafted the whole thing, you can go back and then do pointed research. So at least you don't feel like you're talking totally out of your butt.
Mm-hmm.
But again, a fictional story, as long as you have labeled it fiction and not fact, it's just meant to be a good time.
Yes.
From the other standpoint, I mean, everyone in my family is in a biracial or multiracial relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And for my grandparents, one of the ways that they handled that was by becoming the very best in their field. My grandfather had 3 degrees. My grandmother kept a beautiful home, cooked, had a maid to help take care of the children. They were well-to-do in their community. And while my grandfather was going to school, had 3 children, he was a part-time pastor, which meant he had 10 churches.
Mm-hmm.
That was part-time.
It's a lot.
It is a lot.
1 is a lot, in my opinion, but okay.
But he did all of that in response to a lot of things. I mean, granted, this is in the Caribbean islands, and culturally speaking, things were quite a bit different there. But they immigrated to the United States. I think it was in the 50s, and like around the time of MLK and all of that, and lived in New York and Maryland area. And my grandfather went on to open schools there and churches and do a lot more work in the community where he had already established himself as an educated person, but that was his response to the times. If people are going to question me because of my skin color, I will be far more educated than most people at that time. And as well as my grandmother, she worked at a time where it wasn't common for women to work outside of the home, especially when they had 3 children, especially when they had 3 small children. And the thing was, she had to do 3 times, 4 times as much to prove that she could have a job. She made all of her own clothes. She made all of my aunt's clothes. My grandfather was a tailor before, so he could sew the buttons on his own shirt. Like, it was a matter of not walking around looking raggedy, doing so much by hand that people knew that my grandmother was still very well capable of keeping a home, because that would be a priority. So she couldn't let one thing slip. But those kinds of stories, I mean, that's real life. Taking that into your fictional story is important. Just because there were real people who lived those experiences. So to write it off and only write the most tragical tales possibly imaginable, which, while it can be fun sometimes, is not a full depiction of history.
It's true. Also, I think our readers deserve a more holistic approach to stories. That when you see, well, there's a glut of this kind of story, but this is not the whole picture, that seems like a great opportunity for a writer to go, I could write the part that's missing, the negative space in this picture. that hasn't been
someone
told.
wants that story.
Oh, I guarantee you. I guarantee you that
it's
someone
like-
wants that story.
At this point, even in horror, they've started to almost parody themselves for the fact that the black person in the movies, it's like if there's also a gay person in the scene, everyone's like, oh, this is 50-50. Like,
Yeah, which one is gonna get it?
And I mean, even horror has started to call it out, but something like Scary Movie is able to call that out because it's spoofing everything. There's literally a niche for everything.
Absolutely.
I mean, I love that line. And what was it we watched? Freaky? About, the gay best friend going, I'm a gay boy and there's a serial killer around. No, if we split up, I'm dead.
Like, he literally says it, and it was written by 2 gay men. Like, the screenplay was written, or at least by, or let's say 2 queer men. I don't remember if both of them were actually gay, but there were 2 queer men, and they were like, yep. And when asked in the interviews about the gay best friend character, I can't remember the character kid's name, and I was like, they asked, are either of you this character? They're like, oh, we both are. That's why this kid is so extra flamboyant. He's so extra. Because it was the part that we were, as well as that we wanted to see in horror movies, where they were always straightening out that kid. Ugh.
What about that romantic comedy? And I actually quite like this because of what they did in a way of addressing stereotypes. But she thinks her best friend is gay the whole time, and really he just wants to go on a date with her. And was
that the one with Ryan Reynolds in it? And it was like, God, more than a decade ago now. Like,
no, it was the guy from American Pie.
Okay,
hold on.
I'm like, you haven't narrowed it down the way you think you have.
Yeah, it's like they actually know a couple of these
like
movies.
He kind of plays this
in the late 2000s.
Okay, the guy who is actually with the pie.
Yes, but I'm like,
Jason Biggs.
Okay, which movie? Because there's a bunch. But he kind of played this trip. Like, this really carried him for like what, at least 6 movies or something in the 2000s.
Oh gosh, like, you're right. There are a whole lot.
That's what I'm saying. Like, you have not narrowed it down the way you think you have.
Now she's like, which one was it?
How about we go to break, and when we come back, Chandra will have an answer. This seems like a good time, y'all. Yeah. What do you think? Again, I just want to point out what a great time to get a snack, to get a water, to brew tea, to do what you got to do. And we will be back in just a few minutes.
So the movie Over Her Dead Body with Sophia Longoria, Jason Biggs, and Paul Rudd.
It's a fun movie. It's very cute. I love it.
And I think they did a great job of subverting the plot.
Well, pretty much anything with Eva Longoria is usually a good movie. Like, she has very good choices and scripts.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's another thing to remember within these stories if people raise objections to the way that historical fiction has and can be written is to subvert the plot.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually looking at an earlier question Maggie had posted about, what was it, Twisted Mythology?
Yes.
And, you know, is that historical fiction?
You gave a little shout to let me know I'm coming up.
And I'm just like, look, unless there is documentation in writing from that time, everything we say is actually technically historical fiction. Because it's our interpretation and assumptions of that time.
Mm-hmm. They were just roommates.
Of like, that is, like, that's actually been one of the problems of history, is they write it like, oh, we know all this for fact, when the truth is, no, we don't.
No, you don't.
Versus the facts we actually know historically. We know the oldest written joke is a your mama joke. Like, that's an actual historical fact. We know that shitposting reviews goes back to Babylonian times because we have an actual tablet with a, you know, trolling review of this seller.
Yes.
Written to other people to let them know, do not go to this seller.
Yes.
Or what about I think this is from the show Rome, but where they would like paint like graffiti as a means of disparaging people or creating.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah. And everybody would walk around and be like, oh, look what they did. And then gossip about it. Great.
We have Roman graffiti in England from, you know, 2,000 years ago of so-and-so stole my ring, and they found the ring in that guy's grave like 10, 20 miles away.
So I want to take this opportunity to plug Jessica Kilgren Frozard. If you're interested in historical fiction, especially for LGBTQ plus people, you need to watch the series on her channel. She has an entire playlist for historical events and not just characters, but people. And it is fantastic. First of all, honestly, even if she wasn't saying anything, I could just sit there and look at her all day because she's gorgeous.
I mean, she does have style.
She does. Classic and just timeless. And
yeah, her whole video on how to care for your own crinolines was excellent.
But I mean, can we also just talk about how this might be very useful to someone who's writing historical fiction?
Yes.
Yeah, because she has a specific style that is a period style. There are other people who do this for different time periods and live their lives that way because they want to. And so they're great resources, and a lot of them do have channels, which are great resources. But I actually have that as a video of other YouTubers that you should follow outside of specifically the AuthorTube community that you should follow based off of the genre that you write. And I don't have her in historical fiction, but she definitely covers that very well.
Yes, she does some excellent, descriptors, videos of various historical people that you would probably not know about because they're not taught in traditional history classes of any kind. However, that said, most of what she's covered I have read. fun fact, in historical fiction novels, like the non-binary Quaker in America, I've actually read about this person in a like Salem witch trial-esque book when I was a teenager. I was familiar with this person, and they're not exactly any gender, sort of all genders kind of status. They were discussed by several of the characters in the book. So I was made familiar with this person from that. And again, like just to bring up of how historical fiction can be very effective to essentially give you like a basic kind of touch point knowledge about historical figures you would like more people to know about. Like, so you as a writer can like somehow name drop them in your story in a very easy way of just having two characters discuss, hey, I just read about this person, or I just heard about this person when I went to the general store, or whatever, depending on the setting of your novel. And you would be surprised how, from what I understand from actual historians, how often people in other continents enjoyed discussing what was going on, the goings on other continents. So European peasants apparently frequently discussed the latest drama in China, as was relayed by various, people who'd been on the ships and had just come back. And, they what news do you have? Well, all the news they had was, from along their route. It has nothing to do with local people, right? And yet people love discussing this. And, well, what do you think about this? And what could this mean? That's how humans are.
It would be great if it was like a year later.
Yeah, or 2 or 3 years.
Time it gets back to them.
I mean, like, how about the part where in China only men were allowed to wear dresses?
Yes, women had to wear what we would consider slacks, or really bifurcated type dresses.
Pantaloons.
Yeah, they were really more like pantaloons, long pantaloons. Women were not allowed to wear dresses.
Yeah.
And because it was considered elevated garb, and therefore only for men, for reals. And but like I know from when I lived in the Philippines, there is printed documentation about how much people in Indonesia and Malaysia and the Philippines lived for news from visiting ships about whatever was the latest news in Europe, just so they could discuss it. They knew that their discussion had nothing to do with what would actually happen in Europe, and yet they were like, what is the latest news in the other continents? And that this was true of Africa. People in port cities all along all the coastlines in Africa very much enjoyed whatever was essentially the latest gossip.
What's the latest gossip about the royalty?
Yes. Loved it.
Those crazy people.
Did a lot of art based on what they heard was the latest gossip from other continents. And this went on for literally hundreds, if not actually thousands of years. This was the thing, because humans have never stopped being human-y. So we've always had an interest in this. We always do this. This is super fun. And you can then have any character from any historical time period discuss things, even from another continent, when they get latest news.
Yeah, they were not as cut off as they really like to pretend in fiction of the last century.
Mm-hmm. People didn't like to feel cut off.
No.
Apparently, what was it? Krakatoa was widely discussed for like 20 freaking years in every other continent.
Yes.
Because every other continent eventually had sailors show up and be like, hey, do you remember like so many years ago when like the sky was dark for 7 months? Well, did you hear about what that was? Because we've been wondering. And they're like, oh yeah, that was Krakatoa. Everybody on the planet within 20 years of Krakatoa discussed Krakatoa at length for years. And it's not just weather events, but I'm just saying, like, you can have them discuss anything. You don't have to actually insert these historical figures into your story. You can just have your characters talk about it because it's the latest news, because it's pertinent to them.
Oh, and don't forget, every society assumes they are the most advanced for the most part. So one of the favorite shitpost discussions was, if there was a comet in the sky, Did you hear what this other group did in response to that to try to appease their deities? Like, they all talk shit about each other, even though, no, none of them ever did this. But they totally said, oh yeah, those other people are so simple-minded. They did not realize that was just, you know, a falling star in the sky for a few weeks. And so they were so scared, they did this crazy thing. Everyone around the world has done this about every other society, every group, that is totally lies and BS. But they love doing it.
They still do it. Like, there are groups on Papua New Guinea that, and I mean, these, let's be honest, because like I went to school with a couple of kids who lived in these villages where, you know, there was no electricity, there was no running water. You had to travel 2.5 days to a doctor where they were. And let me tell you, those people were like, yeah, but I bet you've never seen a toilet before. And I'm like, I'm from Mississippi. Anyway, but in their villages in the 90s, we're still talking trash about other communities and how, oh, I bet they are not sure about what the stars mean. Like, and you're like, you have no running water and no electricity. And y'all don't even get newspapers but once every 3 months. Why are you talking shit about other civilizations?
Because at least we know what a star is.
Right? But that's how all humans are, y'all. Like, and they are aware. They are aware that everywhere else they have printers and cars. They're aware, and they're still talking crap. Like, shit posting is just shit posting. Everybody does it. Everyone has always done it. It's a human psychology thing. And when I pointed out, like, the people in your village are shitting on people in Mississippi. Why? Why are they shitting on people in Mississippi? And they're like, everybody does it.
Yeah.
It's just a thing. They didn't think you'd be upset because they figured you'd never hear about it. I'm like, you needed to go back. Would you go back for Christmas this year and let them know that I'm like, well, at least, you know, we don't have to wait 3 months to get a newspaper. There, I said it. And when they finally got internet in the, what was it, the late 2000s, they got on Facebook, found me, and said, okay, so do you want to hear what they replied back to you from the mid-90s? And I was like, I'm ready, give it to me. And we laughed so hard over Facebook. Like, it just, you know, because, like, again, nobody was taking it personally. It was fine. It's just people.
Because we all know, no matter what town you go to, there will be a yokel or two.
Yeah.
And there is the one that you're just like, how do they breathe and blink at the same time? So, you know, if nothing else, there's at least one person who's doing something dumb.
Right.
You know what I would really love? Historical fiction comedy. I think that would be very fun.
Yes, that's why I love Blackadder, and why we posted earlier the link for the 3rd series compilation. So that just takes place during Regency time period. And y'all, the crap that they say about Pitt the Elder versus Pitt the Younger, these are two real people that once existed. And I thought they were BSing. I got to be honest. I thought it was just the British making absurd comedy because I love absurd comedy. And then I literally have a phone in my hand. We're watching and laughing, and I'm looking up Pitt the Elder, like, oh, it's actually worse. These jokes, these are like cherry picking. It's actually worse. And then Pitt the Younger was almost, so they had Pitt the Younger played by a literal child who's now taking over Parliament as the Prime Minister. And
No, they were not actually that young. But they did do the legislation.
They were actually that young because he makes a joke about, you know, and one of his ministers will be quizzing him for his exams. And that part was true because the kid was about to have exams when his father died, so he had to take over his place in the Parliament. And when I say exams, I'm really talking more like high school exams, not college exams. I mean, it was hilarious and absurd, and like, and then Nanny will be making my snack and I'll be having a nap. Like, y'all, though, the kid was not actually that old when Pitt the Younger took over. as well as we have inadvertently learned all about what is a rotten borough. I did not care about UK politics from the Regency time period. I could not care less. However, now I remember it because it was a really funny joke. It was a whole bit they did for an entire episode where they have Colin the Dachshund running as one of the people running for this, position, this elected position in this rotten borough. And they have a real dachshund. And, but like when you make it that entertaining, it's memorable. It's worth looking up. I love it.
I was just thinking suddenly about Miss Peregrine's home for, is it peculiar or unusual children?
I think it's peculiar.
It is home for peculiar children.
That's another example of historical fiction that leaves out the whole war bit, except for a very, yes, it plays into the storyline, but it's not like we're charging through muddy battlefields.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even Parade's End is a miniseries, and yes, it does have quite a few episodes that take place during the war, but that is not the primary focus of the series.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that's one of my all-time favorites.
Really? Oh my gosh, I love Parade's End. I don't know a lot of people that have seen it, so yay.
This cat is driving me absolutely batty.
He needs all the
was
buttons.
loving when you were holding him like a baby. It was just the cutest thing ever.
It's the only way to keep him from clawing me. And then he decided to like have a little nibble because he was like, stop. And I'm like, well, you're hurting me. Your love hurts. I'm just going to give him a little squeeze so that he feels loved and validated until he gets sick of it and wants to go away.
Yeah, squeeze him till he meows.
Yeah.
Oh, he won't. He'll get toothy, but it's fine. It's better than the claws.
Are there any other brainstorming for possible solutions we have for? I mean, I think we've discussed a lot of it, but
write more historical fiction.
Yeah, I
if
think
you
that's
think someone
a
else
real
is
problem.
doing it wrong, do it better.
Yeah,
and have fun with it.
Yeah, and if it modern words, if you start feeling like I'm using modern words in it, look them up before in the edits. Fix it all in the edits, because there are going to be some people who are going to if you use the word blueprint for a time period that's way too early for a blueprint, they'll give you a hard time. So just make sure that you're using sketch or something like that. Just do your research on any words that are super modern. And sometimes just have fun with it, because what's the show that you were telling me about, Glory? The one with all the female authors. It was how it's very modern, but they lean into it.
Oh, Emily Dickinson.
Emily Dickinson, yes.
I think it's called Dickinson.
I was like, I'm going to say the wrong author, but it's so. And I knew it wasn't right. So yes, Emily Dickinson. And so they lean into the fact that it's modernized,
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to do that, just lean into it and everybody's going to know, okay, that's what you're doing. Just try not to do it accidentally, because you'll get people who are like, that's not right, but have fun with it. Write your thing and then fix up the other stuff in edits. Research can be fun. I love doing research. Just enjoy your research. Don't think of it as a chore.
I actually have a service on my Ko-fi where I will help with research if someone is stuck on something, because I love historical fiction and I like finding the things. So, and I mean, when I say finding the things, I have gotten into the weeds so much that I was looking at how much pantyhose cost.
I've done this. I've priced out how much their food would cost, how much this article of clothing would cost, how much each person would make in their occupation, to see what they could actually afford, how much their flour and sugar. But for some people, that's fun. If that's not fun for you, it is fun for Chandra. Chandra will do the things.
And I mean, that's the other thing is, just like with a sensitivity reader, get someone to read for historical accuracy. Get someone who is very versed in the genre to get another pair of eyes on what you're looking at. But to Maggie's question about hours to get into a dress and 4 maids, but it can be out, but they can be out of it in a few minutes. I think look at situations where it's handled well. I would say even Pirates of the Caribbean, where he just takes out his knife and cuts her out of the corset because otherwise she's going to die, and he doesn't have time for all that. I think of in Downton Abbey when the eldest daughter is having her first little shindig, and she's already in her nightgown and just a dressing robe in her nightgown, so we get to skip all that. Also, that is probably one of my favorite, most tragic scenes. And also, it's a great opportunity to show the closeness of a lady and her lady's maid.
Yes.
I thought they did a great job with that and the purpose, part of the purpose of the scene, aside from the fact that it was just marvelous in every way. But
although that does remind me of my number one Hollywood annoyance at historical anything.
Oh.
Up until like the last 200 years, no one would have ever dreamt of cutting rope. Of like cutting someone out of bonds of rope because it was so valuable.
Mm-hmm.
They would have just undone the knot because they were so familiar with knots.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But you don't cut rope unless absolutely necessary.
You mean like someone's dying right now?
It's like I can put something in that knot and get it loose. Don't worry, we got this.
You're in the ocean and you're tangled up in a bunch of rope and you're going down with a keg.
Like that's about it for when they'd actually cut. Because otherwise, no, that's why the Greek, not the Greek myth, but the story of what's his name, Alexander the Great. One of the the big stories to show how smart Alexander was him cutting the Gordian knot, because no one at the time would have dreamt of cutting the knot.
Because we're talking about what everyone knows. What everyone knows, nobody talks about.
Mm-hmm.
Because why would you talk about it? Everyone knows. I just real quick, we're talking about European fashions, and to a lesser degree American fashions. I just want to point out this is a channel that I've used quite extensively for historically accurate videos about getting dressed.
Yep.
With a lot of different time periods
as well. Yeah, I like to watch the ones where they're getting dressed. Also, they have ones where they show you the period accurate way to do dances. So if you need to describe a dance, when it was okay for people to actually be touching, when the waltz came in. So if you want to have that super romantic, but they're in a group setting dance, which is why all of the Jane Austen ones, they're barely touching the hands, and you know what I mean? But for them,
also why in the 2005 Pride and Prejudice, the moment where they first touch hands is such a big deal. Yeah, I mean, adding those kinds of details is super fun, but you do not have to know that in the first draft.
No, I mean, honestly, the only reason why I cared about getting dressed was how to then describe getting undressed.
Yes.
For what I was writing.
Versus to me,
don't have your guy just ripping that bodice.
Yeah, versus to me, like the more fun fact
for a long time
is like the hallways only exist for a dance. Up until the Virginia Reel, hallways are not part of any architecture.
Right.
Yeah.
They only exist for dance halls.
I want to also mention, as far as the dressing and undressing goes, there would be a certain group of men who would be very, very familiar with women's dress. And there would be another group of men who would be very, very unfamiliar with women's dress. So I think it says something about the character, how long it takes them to get the love interest or paramour out of the clothes. And that might actually be a way to indicate characters' level of romantic experience, especially if you're wanting to create a little bit of a power dynamic and a mismatch as far as what each person knows. In the same way that is done in Bridgerton, where not everyone is on the same page, as it were.
And I know, like, most people are not probably trying to write as many bedroom scenes as I have. But again, I would just like to point out this wonderful video that Abby Cox did, 500 Years of Women's Corset Stays and Bras.
Yes.
Very helpful for understanding the evolution of this article of clothing. In part, in case you do want to describe taking it off.
Yeah. I'll never understand the point of the pointy bra, but it was a thing.
I kind of like it.
Like,
I'm
corsets, as we know it, are a Victorian thing, and they're not even early Victorian. What are stays? How can you tell the difference? Why did tight lacing not become popular until I think it's either the 1850s or 1860s? And it wasn't even really that popular. Like, less than 25% of women ever even considered doing it because, my goodness, so controversial. Mostly because women were actually wearing it for back support. Because when you're lifting all these buckets of water and everything else, you need like some support.
Can I also just say that I had prescribed to me by a chiropractor, I had a modern version of that with a foam pad that was like in the back, and then straps that I could
you tighten up
all the way around because I hurt myself lifting something and I needed a brace.
Yeah, Jessica Pelgrin Fozzard actually wears a corrective one because she has double scoliosis. Holy cow. And has some wonderful informative videos about that, by the way. And, in part, as she puts it, in case anybody wants to do some historical stuff, she shows her x-rays. So again, historical fiction doesn't have to be ableist either. Throwing that out there. But there are some wonderful resources about all this if you're interested. But frankly, if you're not, the readers will still have fun. So what if you don't know how to describe taking off stays? So what? Have a good time anyway.
But I mean, that's another reason that I would mention that there's a different experience level because you don't necessarily need to. If your character is also inexperienced, he fumbled with the laces. Good, get it, got it done.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I would expect a woman wearing it would know how to get in and out of it when she wants to.
Yeah,
I don't know. I think it depends on like how upper crust is she.
And
if she has just never dreamt of not being without her, her maids in waiting.
She might not know how to get out of her own clothes.
And
I mean, there's some erotic times.
Being nervous. I mean, you may not necessarily know what's going on back there. I mean, how old was I before I figured out how to zip myself into a dress or the most efficient way to put a bra on without having someone there to snap it for you? Like, some of these things take a minute.
Yep, they do take a minute. You're absolutely right. They do take a minute. So I just, that's all. There's a solution for everything. By the way, on our Discord server, we do have quite a bit of research because research librarians sometimes just finds it comforting to research. And all of that is available for anybody to use that research to add their own research under those headings. And if there's a new one we need to make, we'll make another one. You just let us know. So that you can offload all your research. Like, here, I already know this stuff. Let other people benefit. Because, I know way too much about cattle prices in the 1870s and 1880s in Western U.S. It is not necessary to either of the stories I am working on. But yet, I am aware of all the economics of cattle herding.
I have some direct links to scanned, archived 1880s newspapers for whatever you might need those for. Personally, I just needed the name of a newspaper and a date where they didn't have a scanned publication. That way I could make up my own headline without it being possible for someone to contradict me. Tell me it wasn't like that. You don't know.
You don't know.
That's honestly, that summarizes historical fiction really well. Tell me it wasn't like that. You don't know.
look, at a certain point, if you really are like, I just don't want people to come for me, what you do is you make up a state or province or territory that never existed so that your readers understand it's speculative fiction.
Yep.
And then you just put in whatever you want because, hey, this province, this territory didn't exist.
I never use an actual
nowadays
town.
Don't know.
Yep. I use a town adjacent. So I can use the similarities that I know.
Yep.
And anything that's different, I could say, well, that is not that town.
Right? That's what I do in...
I made this place up.
I have a fictional town in Mississippi. And I figured, well, if Faulkner can do it, I can do it too.
Mr. Falls.
I made up a county and a town name in Mississippi that does not exist, which I had to research in order to find one that didn't exist, that was historically accurate for when they would have started it, because it worked for Faulkner. I mean, like, as a middle schooler, I won a Yoknapatawpha Arts Council honorable mention. And I'm like, it worked for him. It works for me now.
But there's also the option of, like, portals, where something can be between several things with only a few different ways to get there. And they're all places, like, for example, there's a pond in the middle of 3 counties. And if you actually go into the middle of the pond, it's a portal to said place. And you can put that into any time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, the pond is there, but I mean, are you going to dive to the bottom to prove me wrong?
Yeah.
You know, how far are you willing to go to tell me that this is not a thing?
Yeah.
You can just do what you want, have a good time doing it. Because at the end, I think, like, what should be the overriding concern should be the desire to tell this story, whatever this story is.
And if you
rather than something well researched, even though research can be a lot of fun. I love it.
And if you are going to use something and you're going to, like, say you want to use I don't know, George Washington, and everybody knows George Washington, but you want to change something specifically to make it to your story, just say, hey, this is what I'm doing. I know George Washington didn't do this, to our knowledge anyway, but I'm adding this for the plot point of my own story. So I know.
I mean, all this stuff is Sleepy Hollow.
And go with it.
This is a thing that Diana Gabaldon does.
George Washington never did that. And you'd be like, I know, I already said that. I made this up.
Like,
it's still fiction.
He wasn't at this specific battle. Here's where he really was, but I moved him here for the experience of X, Y, and Z. Or Charlene Harris, this is actually contemporary, but it contained alternate history, which is historical fiction, because she created some lore for the True Blood / Sookie Stackhouse series, where she would bring in historical characters and make them, you know, vampires to explain why does everyone think you're dead and why are you here? And it was like, well, what happened was, and it's very hush hush, nobody say anything about it, but it gives a really fun way to bring in whoever she wants to. And people who write historical fiction need to remember that if you can write in an explanation for bringing in whatever history you want to.
Yep, you definitely can.
I mean, you could write a historical fiction where there's no electricity because the person who needed to do that was actually born and then had a tragical accident and never created light bulbs or electricity or any of that stuff. You can twist and turn however you want to. And voila, now you have historical fiction that's also alternate history, but you can do whatever you want with it.
You do what you want. You can have a grand old time. Do not let research or the desire or the need for research be a gatekeeper to yourself for writing it.
Personally, I don't even, like, aside from setting, I do some setting research just because, like, what I'm personally writing needed to be grounded on that level. And I wanted to be able to give a little bit of direction to where people are going and what they're doing to build a little realism around the location, because setting is very important to my story. But That's the only research I do before I start writing. Everything else, as far as would they call this that word? Is that the kind of clothes they would wear? All of that stuff, it didn't matter. I'm writing 3 standalones in the same world, and there'll also be a trilogy in the same world, all historical fiction. And I drafted the first book that'll be a standalone in this group. And for that book, I didn't do any research at all. And I didn't even have a time setting for it. I wrote everything to figure out, will I need electricity for this? Will I need running water? Will I need them to have a car, or can they still have the kind of carriages that I want? And then once I'd written it and I realized, okay, these are all the things I used. These are some of the words that I used that helped ground it in a specific time. And then I went and I looked for a time where there wasn't a war happening, and there was running water, but no electricity. And they still had carriages in a lot of places. And that was the time period that I chose.
Mm-hmm.
So I, in some regards, with historical fiction, you can reverse engineer whatever it is you're working on. Just write to figure out what you need in the story and then place it.
Yeah. I did a similar thing with a historical fiction I've got like on the back burner. But I want a early telephone operator. I want it before the phones had any dials, where the phone operator had to do everything. Like when phones first got in, and I was like, at what point did they get the dial? So so I'm like, that's the time period that we're doing this in. So it was that a specific thing because of a young woman who's trying to get a job as an operator. That's what it's kind of revolved around her. And so I'm like, I need it to be in that time. So exactly what were the dates before you got a dial, of any kind, but you still had the operator. So, because they had operators for a long time, but I wanted that specific early.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, and how did those phones work? Because it was literally you just pick the phone up. Situation.
I really wanted to do that when I was a little kid before I realized that didn't happen anymore.
Did you also want to, what was it, Lily Tomlin?
Everybody's phone calls.
I feel like that just might tell you everything you need to know about my personality.
Everybody like, Operator Chandra, did you hang up yet?
Yeah, when in the early to mid 80s, where we lived in married housing at the university in South Mississippi, because my parents moved there to get their second degrees to teach, and they still use the old party line system. So for every so many apartment complexes, they still had a live operator, and they usually mostly paid them in rent. So they would live in one of the apartments, and they would have, truly, it was like, hey, remote working is not something new. But yeah, they would have their whole board there. That was the living room, and be plugging everybody in. So there were times if it was like an emergency in the middle of the night and you needed to call for an ambulance, you'd have to go walk over to her apartment and wake her up to connect you outside of the system. That is as homespun as it gets. But that was still going on in the 80s down in Mississippi, because of course it was. Because of course it was. It was. My mother said the 80s were the 1940s with fax machines in South Mississippi. She was like, it was wild, y'all. But so I always felt like I kind of stepped out of time. I stepped out of this strange speculative fiction world of anachronism, because technically we were in the 80s, but we actually still had all of this throwback technology. We had not been upgraded because, of course, it was Mississippi. And this was part of HUD housing. So in HUD housing, why would we upgrade your phone lines? You should just be grateful you have roofs, I guess. That was HUD housing in the 80s. So yeah, I am familiar with what you're talking about with the switchboard operator.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just went down a little rabbit hole just now.
Color me shocked. Yeah.
I just never Googled my grandfather before.
And you were like,
Oh, was that
this
fun?
is the time.
Yes. I am yeah.
Are you impressed?
I mean, I was already impressed. It's just like seeing some of his relatives
Loki
and things that happened in his lifetime. My grandfather was born in 1920. I mean, obviously, yes, but I mean, when I was little, like 6, 7, my grandparents were in their 70s.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know, there's just a lot of history.
It is, yes.
Which is really
It is. You're absolutely right. So, did anybody have any final thoughts about historical fiction or writing in it they wanted to share before we wrap up?
I like historical fiction. I have some fun videos on my channel about writing historical fiction. If you want to talk about writing historical fiction, you should come talk to me. If you want to just hang out and talk about history, you should come talk to me. If you're a history nerd, you should come talk to me.
I'm getting a vibe.
And if you would like to collectively fall into a research hole, well, that's your girl.
Definitely. Nia,
what Chandra said. I love it.
Okay.
Yes. History is fun. Research is fun. If you ever just want to watch a rando documentary on anything from history, I'm your girl. I keep trying to rope my kids into them, and they're just like, "Mom, what are you?" I'm like, "Let's watch this documentary on ancient Mesopotamia." They're like, "No."
Why don't we have some watch parties for stuff like that?
Yeah, we could have watch parties.
I would be so down. Also, if you need a historical reference book, because you know there's a lot of things that you can't find online as far as history, because you know a lot of history predates the interwebs.
Funny how that works out, yeah.
So if you need someone who has reference books,
Sorry,
I has reference books. They were 50 cents a piece. Anyway. I got so excited, let me just tell you, but I was aghast because someone pulled them out of order and only took part of the series.
what?
Those people are psycho.
That is rude.
But you can't just take LMNOP because that's what you need. You take the whole dang series. The hell is wrong with you?
No, I'm with you, Chandra. I need the Ottoman Empire. Why would you take
The world is madness.
I would say something else though, real quick.
What else did they take? I mean, they took a lot of good stuff. Neanderthals? What?
I'm so mad. I'm still mad about that. This happened months ago when I filmed my vlog. I'm still mad about it.
I think also another quick thing though, inspiration for historical stories is don't forget to ask friends and family for any of their, historical family stories. It often will clue you in about things that were interesting at the time. I mean, like our paternal grandmother met her future husband because back when they did stunt flying races, one of those giant tall pylons fell on him, but the ground was so wet, he just got squished into the ground. And it took, a few months for him to recover in the hospital, and that's where she met him.
She's volunteering.
But I mean, you don't really hear much talk about the very short time period for a few decades, where they did aerial racing with airplanes in the early times when the airplanes were just starting. But this was a big thing for 2 or 3 decades.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of great plot points there. But you only hear it when you hear people talk about, like, so what are your family stories of fun, weird stuff that don't do that. Yeah,
Or
that
how
your
about
family
the
talks
cursed
about.
jewelry that the same people got?
Oh, God.
Grandpa Rudy's cursed
Yeah.
platinum and diamond jewelry. Yeah, like that he was gifted from, what was it? Was it the state of Alaska? I don't remember who.
Yeah.
But like it was Russian, it was smuggled. I don't know. There was all sorts of crazy stuff.
I mean, it was Alaskan diamonds and platinum, but it was just it was so cursed.
It was very
God,
cursed.
that jewelry was so cursed.
Yes, because like you can't get rid of it because every time it was stolen, those people had terrible ends, and then the jewelry was returned.
Yeah,
for reals. Yeah, it's so, and the family lore passes down all these stories, so they're very time specific to each theft. Because because he got it. What was it? Oh, right. It was during the Iditarod time period when Grandpa Albert was a lawyer there in Alaska. So again, like you just never know. You can ask people about like their family and do you have any family stories from say certain time periods or certain locations, and kind of mine people for inspiration. For things, the odd stuff going on in various geographic, time-specific locations.
because that's what makes the flavor text.
Yes. So yeah, those were my final thoughts too.
The world needs more historical fiction.
I think so. I think especially also needs more diverse historical fiction.
Yes.
Yeah.
That one especially.
Don't be afraid of it. The people were there. Even if you want to write European or colonial style historical fiction, people of color were there. Jane Austen was ready to write about it. Unfortunately, it was her last novel. She didn't get to finish it. And people like that were mentioned in Vanity Fair. And of course, we talked earlier about Belle. Those people existed. Look at any of the paintings. I believe Medieval POC still has their Twitch up, even if they're not posting anymore. You can scroll back through, find some inspiration from one of these people of color from one of the paintings, and write a character based on one of them, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And make up their life. It's fun.
Don't forget about the period after the Civil War where people were elected to office. Even though there was negative history that happened after it, it's important.
There was a good 15 years where
it's important to talk about that.
It is.
Before Jim Crow became a thing and why Jim Crow became a thing. But there was a good period of time.
I mean, if we can write a positive story for Beauty and the Beast, when it's like, 5 years after Beauty and the Beast ends, they got strung up on the gallows during the French Revolution. Like, doesn't matter. We have a good story for right here this time.
Right here, right now.
Yeah, just have a good time with it and definitely just get in there and have fun.
Part of it is also to let people know that this is possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yep.
I think so. I hope more people will toe dip in.
Yeah.
Do it.
And what is the worst that could happen? Oh, you've researched a little, so at least now you better understand a certain time period in geographic location. Oh no, you've learned things.
Yeah, you
find
out when the first
up writing it. Whatever it doesn't matter. You now know more things.
Yeah, you find out when the first transatlantic phone call was made. You never know what you're going to find out.
You never know where you're going to use this later, even if it's like, oh, well, that research didn't pan out. I didn't end up writing. It's like, but you know it. And now it may somehow inform something later that you cannot foresee from your current position in time and place.
Yeah,
you might find out
you might find out which civilizations actually had plumbing before we had plumbing.
If you want to write alternate history, not alternate history, but alternate timeline, which is contemporary. If you have an alternate timeline, you automatically have alternate history. Everyone needs historical fiction. I rest my case.
Boom. The mic has been dropped. There you go.
I mean, can you just imagine what if electricity was considered a Chinese or an Asian invention? And just the weird talk of how, like, but it's really useful. But do you really trust what they're doing? Like, are you sure they are? Like, you can take this whole different approach of what if it wasn't, made locally in your country or the country that originally came up with it? What if, you see the Industrial Revolution take off, in South America or Africa?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Also, this is one last thought. Just because you have a diverse cast of characters doesn't mean that you can't make a diverse character the bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
It's about how you do it, not making it because of their differences. Their differences don't come into play when they become the villain in the story.
It
may be the reason that people already distrust them, but to subvert the plot, the reason that they are distrusted doesn't have to have anything to do with what makes them the actual villain.
It's true. I feel like as long as you have plenty of diversity, then you don't need to worry as much about who is the good guy and who is the bad guy, because you have so much diversity. It's just a melange.
Yeah, you don't only have one gay person, so that person is the bad guy, then that looks bad. Or you don't only have one black person or one Latino person, and you make that person the bad guy, or just the horrible,
right? You don't have just one indigenous person.
Yeah.
But when you have multiple, then you can even have conversations of like, why are you doing this? Like, they can have conversation. These characters can have conversations, just the two of them, or 3 or 4, of like, hey, we all like this, but why are you being extra?
Yeah.
Of like, seems like you're going down a dark path, person. And they're like, well, I have my reasons. Oh, like, oh, please give us your villain plot right now.
My culture says I should conquer them. I have the same culture.
Literally have the same culture. I don't know what you're talking about. Please explain this to my grandma.
I think there's also examples of that. I will once more, as always, Miss Swan, bring up Diana Gabaldon with Claire Fraser.
Why did you say the word Outlander? That's what everyone knows. Just say the word Outlander.
Okay, sorry. So in Outlander,
just name drop.
No spoilers or whatever, but maybe some. But there's even when we talk about the diverse cast of characters and how to not make Claire the white savior, it's simply by having, like, yes, she does know a lot of stuff that no one else knows because she comes from the future. But also, there are so many diverse characters who teach her things along the way, who help her, who save her when she's in difficult situations. That as much as she saves other people, she is also saved by the culture in which she is now living.
Right. Like, I think they made the first doctor that she really worked with and mentored with he was black. So you have a black man and a woman during what was still hard for her time period that she actually came from. Mm-hmm. So, I really like that dynamic. So then she goes back further into the past, and this is where a lot of her knowledge comes from.
Anyway, I keep saying, like, and I'm done, but
are we though?
And another thing.
Yes, I okay.
I think it may be a good place to end.
Would you like to do outros? Anybody?
I think I've plugged so much stuff that I've done just throughout the chat because
like you just like
fiction.
Let me drop a little more there.
Yeah, I feel like y'all know me.
Yep. Y'all know it. How about this? Okay.
If you like historical fiction, science fiction, fantasy, and you want to talk about it, or you have questions and stuff, just come say hi. I mostly have videos about historical fiction on my channel as far as the writing process goes, but I will be doing more on science fiction and fantasy in the future. But right now, my primary focus as a specific genre and how-tos is historical fiction. I talk a lot about research. I also do a lot of research. So if you are interested in those subjects, even if you have questions that are not listed on my channel and you want to ask me a question, you can DM me on Instagram. I'm happy to take requests that way or even just have a conversation about it. I would love to. And yeah. Oh, you can also bump into one of my live streams on Tuesday night and we can chat about it there. Yeah, do it. Love it.
Excellent. Mia, you ready?
Sure. I'm Mia, the Vixen of Fiction, here on YouTube and on Twitch. I also love talking all things historical fiction. I love reading it. I love doing research. You can catch me on one of my live streams randomly on a Monday, Friday, or a Saturday and chat me up. I hang out with these folks, so you'll see me around if you have any questions or, you have thoughts about should I add this into a story, or especially if you want to write diversely in historical fiction. I will be your cheerleader because that's my jam. You can find me on all the places. I just got my website and my Ko-fi up and running, so you can also find me there under Vixen of Fiction. And yeah, I had a great time. I love talking historical fiction, research, outlining. If you have any questions about outlining and plotting, even for your fantasy or your sci-fi novel, because again, history, it is literally making the history for your world. Love it. Yeah, hit me up, chat me up. I'm here.
Thank you. Tom, did you want to do an outro? It is optional. Nope. Okay. All right. It's my turn. Hi. I'm Glory, and this is the channel on YouTube that we do the things. Glory Writes the Blues. Also, we do do things on Twitch. And what to say, Tom? Genre hop. We write in most genres, including nonfiction as well. I don't know. All the things.
Glory knows everything about women's clothing. I'm serious. Do ask Glory all your questions about women's clothing, women's rights, just women's issues in general. If you're stuck, if you have questions, if you don't know something, Glory will know it.
I do
have their Discord. Yes.
There is quite a bit on Discord, and there is more coming, obviously, on Discord because I research for comfort. Honestly, I love it. What we have coming up is next week, November 8th, on Monday, we're going to talk about LGBTQIA+ / queer fiction. For some reason, they made it into a genre. Okay. So we're going to talk about writing queer characters.
Do you have me down for that?
Let me see. I do not, but I can make things happen because I got a pen.
I might come late, but I have thoughts for this, and I have some lesser known sci-fi for this. So every opportunity I have to plug these books, I will fight.
Absolutely. Yeah, because I mean, like, queer is considered a genre now.
And what if it's historical fiction, or what if it's sci-fi? Okay.
Yeah, we'll definitely be talking about the problematic part the second hour for probably a little bit longer than an hour. However,
I have questions.
we love our queer characters. We love our queerness. I will say I feel like there isn't enough fiction that highlights the Stonewall Rebellion, that highlights queerness through history. Truly, as Charlie was saying, that whole Sappho and her friends subreddit, and the whole they were just roommates. Like, they were not just roommates. They were so much more.
I already have a hot take for this topic, and it's burning a hole in my pocket.
So join us on Wednesday on Twitch where we get ready for this episode. I'm
going to go write it down.
Are you available Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern?
Wednesday, yes.
Well, then you should definitely join us on Twitch.
Oh, I know what we're going to be doing.
Yes. That was what Tom was talking about during one of the breaks was, okay, so as soon as we wrap up preparing for the Monday episode, we can then immediately start the Don't Starve Alone, whatever the Don't Starve episode. We can just immediately do it, and we can do it for the second half of the show. And I'm like, cool. So that's what we're planning on doing Wednesday. You should totally join us on Twitch for that. Where we get ready for the Monday episode. Like we put together, I do the graphics and stuff during the breaks where we do sprints and things. And we discuss the episode ahead of time because we have to essentially discuss the episode in order to come up with emotionally engaging titles and show descriptions. So we essentially pre-game Monday's episode on Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern on Twitch. So if you are at all interested in that, please come join us Wednesdays at 9 on Twitch, Mondays at 4 p.m. Eastern on YouTube. And we will be discussing that. We hope you'll be able to come. And if not, there's always the replays, both on Twitch and on YouTube. We'd absolutely love for you to let us know what you think. And we hope to see you soon. As always, please like, subscribe, share the things, all the things, y'all. Thank you so much for coming, y'all. We will see you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.